Welcome everybody to the meeting of the Sequoia Union High School District Board of Trustees. This is the public portion before our closed session meeting. And I am pausing to see if there are any public comments. I don't see any, so we will go ahead and adjourn to closed session. Welcome everybody to our meeting of the Board of Trustees for the Sequoia Union High School District. As I welcome you tonight, I wanted to point to the flowers here, a symbol for Ukraine. So they're in the colors of the country. I know so often we all bring the weariness of what's going on in the country and the world with us. We bring it into our schools and into our meetings. So I wanted to just reflect on the suffering that is going on in other parts of the world, because it's certainly on all of our minds. So I welcome you to this meeting. And for those of you who want to speak, there are several opportunities to speak. You can speak on items that are not on the agenda during the public comment section. And then also you can speak to individual agenda items. And we do have translation that is available. And I'm going to turn it over to Gigi.
Buenas noches. Para cualquier persona necesita asistencia de traducir, presiona el botón en la parte inferior de la pantalla llamando Interpretation. Gracias.
Thank you for that. So can I have a roll call, please?
Student Trustee Stid.
Here.
Student Trustee Osuna.
Here.
Trustee Thompson.
Here.
Trustee Stevenson.
Here.
Trustee Sarver.
Here.
Vice President Ginn.
Here.
President Dubois.
Here.
A quorum is present.
Thank you for that. Next item is approval of the agenda. And I was wondering if the board would be willing to move item 14.1 up. One of the things that concerns me at times, we have items that are of great concern to the public, and we sometimes make the public wait a very long time. So they may be very interested in the COVID update tonight. People are wondering about masks, so is it okay to move it up? Okay, could I have a motion to do that?
Just quick discussion, it's possible that people who want to hear that know to wait for a while because they know that other things will take and they'll join later and miss it. But I agree with the spirit of that.
So what do you guys think we should do?
I just bring that up for a possibility. I support if we think that most people who want to hear that topic are here. By here, I mean in the attendees in the Zoom.
We do have
support it.
50 participants, which is more than normal. And then, so you guys can I have a motion then?
I move to approve the agenda with the change you recommended.
Okay.
I'll second.
For that. So all in favor of approving the agenda?
Aye.
Okay, thank you. Next item is the report out on closed session. I have nothing to report. The board did not take any action. Now we're on item 7, approval of the consent agenda. And I wanted to pause to see if there's any public comment on our consent agenda. Oh, okay. So Carol Ann Coleman.
Yes,
Thank you.
hello. Good evening, everyone. Now I can thank everyone for our raise. I can officially thank, because I guess it was premature last month. I apologize about that. Wonderful to see everyone. I just love you guys. It's March. It's March. It's March. So I'm just doing public comment for two things. And since my doctor said I can't do summer school this summer,
Hey, Carolyn,
I'm just,
Carolyn, sorry to interrupt. Did you want to talk during public comment?
I
Or-
did.
Or, yeah, so this is just, we're just approving the consent calendar. Sorry about that.
Oh, I'm
So,
sorry.
no, it's okay. Could I call you back up? at
You
public
can-
comment?
I was on a roll. That's
Sorry,
completely
why did you
fine.
get to come up twice? I got flagged that you wanted this part. It's totally my fault.
We might even give her back the 30 seconds she already used. It.
Okay, so I need a motion to approve our consent.
I would like to pull item 716.
716. Anything else? Okay. So motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to
without-
approve the consent agenda absent item 716.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Roll call.
Aye.
Roll call.
And roll call, please.
Student trustee Stid? Student trustee Osuna?
Yes.
Trustee Thompson?
Yes.
Trustee Stevenson?
Yes.
Trustee Sarver?
Yes.
Vice President Ginn?
Yes.
President Dubois?
Yes.
The quorum is present.
Okay. And our next item is superintendent's recognition.
Good evening, everyone. It indeed, thank you.
Before
is-
we get started, don't we have the habit of trying to address items that were pulled immediately
Usually
now?
at the end, right? Or you want to do it now?
I think we've been trying to do it immediately after the consent.
Okay.
I believe we're talking about the item that I requested to be pulled from the consent agenda, or the resolution 1708. I'm just going to read a section of it. Point 1 says, "The recitals set forth above are true and correct." And some of the sentences above talk about the Omicron wave having a rapid and alarming rise in cases and hospitalizations. I believe that cases and hospitalizations have been falling recently, not rising. It says meeting in person for meetings of the Sequoia High School District would present imminent risk to the health or safety attendees. I don't believe that that is accurate. And there's other sections as well, but for those reasons, I don't support this resolution.
Okay, so you're voting no.
Can I ask of my colleague whether with amendments you would, those things are easily changed, the whereas clauses.
Well, number 2, the board of trustees finds that meeting in person would present imminent risk to the health or safety of attendees, and that COVID-19 public health emergency continues to directly impact the ability of board members to meet safely in person. So be changing that as well.
Let me ask of it's my understanding this will give us more flexibility, which I mean, came up for me personally last time where I was going to have a problem. Well, one, if you're sick, you might not be able to participate, and others. And so where I can see adjusting the whereas clauses in the ways that you've suggested while retaining the benefit of this resolution.
There was an article that came out in our CSBA thing about this that suggested that perhaps all you need to say is that the governor has declared a state of emergency and a local health agency has recommended social distancing. Both of those things I believe are true. And if we could do it based on just those two, I would support that because those two things I believe are true. If there's 4 of you who believe that this is accurate, you can vote yes on it, but I don't.
You know, I believe when it was first brought up, there were several members of the board that were concerned that the wording was rather extreme for the benefit of being allowed to take advantage of the state of emergency wording to be able to have remote participation at need. And the goal is to ensure that we have the flexibility to be able to use the remote participation while there is a need and while the state of emergency opportunity is still there. So if there has been a recommendation from CSBA about it, basically stating that that there is a state of emergency and that social distancing is appropriate, and that for that reason we retain the right to have remote participation of board members as necessary by cause. I would be more comfortable with it on written to comply with that. I would agree with you.
Just because I didn't say it was their recommendation, there's an article that suggested that that was the case, and it was unclear whether it's like I'm not sure, it was an article in the magazine.
If I may, I just want to remind the board that this is the document that was provided by council. So I don't know how adjusting language will shift our flexibility. And so there are certain sections that must be stated. And so if we are going to offer any revisions, I would add that we check before it is approved or authorized, if that is a question.
I guess I'd like to recommend that to my colleagues, because I think the intent is appropriate and the language might be adjusted to reflect what we see as reality.
And also just a reminder that it has to be renewed every 30 days. So if in fact between now and the next meeting, someone should be unable to attend in person, then that person will not be able to participate via Zoom.
Unless they post for 72 hours.
Okay,
Yeah, yes.
so the board,
Would still
Will
suggest
the
that
board
we table this, bring it back. I think you've heard, the superintendent has heard the sense of the board on this.
okay, so bring it back and just not vote on it tonight.
Yes.
Yes? Pardon me? You want them to,
They need a motion, someone.
okay?
I'm sorry, can you share
She would like us to vote on it.
to vote?
It
Yeah.
just depends if someone wants to make a motion. No one has to make a motion.
Does somebody want to make a motion?
No.
Anybody else?
So what we're saying, by not voting for this, we won't have the flexibility.
Right, unless you
Of
post.
virtual meetings for those who are on the dais.
Yes,
Cannot virtually be here.
unless you post 72 hours in advance. And so if you're homesick, you would have to
So I'd have to
allow
come
the
in
public to
sick.
come to your house.
I'd have to come in sick.
No, or you allow the public to come to your house. Just post and we can get more instructions on how to do that. Or if you're, right, that's correct. And or if you're at a hotel room, you have to
We want
post.
check within 72 hours.
Yeah.
If it's after that, then no, you will not, correct, you will not.
Carrie, I guess what I'm suggesting is that it be reviewed once again, that perhaps at the next agenda, it comes back to us in a form that's acceptable. And I would hope that will give us, when we authorize that, it gives us that option to participate at a distance, which I think can be very useful.
All right, so everybody just needs to stay healthy.
Yeah, because I actually emailed you and said, I didn't like the language, not because of you, but because of where we are. But if it is, we can revisit, especially with our council, to make sure we write something that's reflective and not contradictory of the law. And I don't think we gave you enough time to do that. So I would take it as is. And then at the next meeting, come with my suggestion. You guys can agree or not agree. Come with the appropriate language with our council to make sure that we have the right language that represents not what I feel, but what would not go against the law.
So are you saying you would make a motion to go ahead and pass it tonight?
Yes.
So you're making the motion?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Okay, I can do that. I can make it a motion to pass this.
All right, so we do have a motion. Do we have a second?
Before seconding, I'd like to ask one more question of the superintendent. You mentioned that we have to renew this within 30 days to keep it active. I would assume it's been a while. We're not going to get to a next meeting within 30 days of when we first authorized it. Does it lapse at day 30 and can then be renewed thereafter? So that would mean that for our next meeting, if we do not pass what's before us, if someone is suddenly ill or unavailable at the last minute before our next meeting, they would not be able to participate remotely.
Correct.
So Shanice's motion would allow us to have in place a stopgap that we think is overkill to make sure that we're not put in that position for our next meeting. And at our next meeting, we could review and approve wording that we find to be appropriate to the need we're trying to satisfy. Or if we do not approve it tonight, then next meeting is at risk of an ill trustee being unable to dial in remotely and join us.
Okay.
So with that understanding, I would second Shanice's motion.
Okay, thank you for that second. So all in favor? That's 3 ayes and all against 2 and 2 noes.
Could we, is this where the direction is that you'll come back with something more appropriate?
Yeah,
Okay,
so we have it in place for the next
great, thank you.
meeting in case somebody gets sick. That took a while. So that allowed some extra people to get on since we moved the COVID topic up. All right, now on to superintendent's recognition.
Hello again. Good evening. So, happy International Women's Day for everyone and Women's Month. It is such a great pleasure to see all of you. This is always one of the most exciting times in the agenda, and that is when me and the board and the district have the honor to acknowledge the great work that is happening within our district. And so very, very, very much excited this evening. I'd like to ask for Principal Stephanie Ogden to come forward. Give her a big round of applause. And this is a special acknowledgement. Personally, I can say I appreciate the work that is moved forward at Redwood High School for our students who attend Redwood High School Continuation School. It is a stellar program. When you walk on the campus, not only is it friendly, you meet folk, you are greeted with a smile, but the students are highly engaged. They're highly engaged and interactive with one another, also with the community and with their instructors. And they also speak very highly of their instructors and also of their school leaders. And so Redwood High School was selected as a model continuation high school for the 2022 school year by the California Department of Education and the California Continuation Education Association, plus, which recognizes continuation high schools that offer outstanding educational opportunities for their students. Redwood is recognized for working to establish a nurturing and supportive environment that motivates each of its students to excel. This includes their efforts to maintain their students' connections to school and their essential sense of belonging with the school community and learning community throughout the challenges posed by COVID-19. The innovative programs offered by Redwood demonstrate an enduring commitment to providing young people with the educational options and support they need to complete high school successfully, transition to higher education, and enter the workforce. It is of 3 years of service under your leadership, and we just want to say congratulations. We are proud of the designation, and it is representative of all the collective work put forth by parents, teachers, and students and staff members. And so I'd like to present to you, congratulations, Principal Ogden and the administrative team, staff, and students, certificate of recognition. The Sequoia Union High School District Board of Trustees proudly recognizes Redwood High School for being selected by the California Department of Education and the California Continuation Education Association Plus as a model continuation school from April 2022 to March 2025. Congratulations.
Thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Thank you very much to the board and the cabinet and everybody that supports our school. It is a joint achievement to have this. We're super excited to have this. We're very happy that you provide an opportunity for students who have not had agency in their life before to become agents in their own lives. And so that's what we do. We're super happy. We just graduated 25 students Friday, which will happen again. Yep, super awesome. For those that don't know, we graduate students throughout the year when they're finished with their credits. So thank you again for all the support. Please come out. We have a big fundraiser happening in May. But anytime anybody would like to come out and tour the garden, the environmental program in the center in the back is becoming such a spectacular place. And I really like to share it with you. So anytime you can, come on by. So thank you. Thank you again. Thank you.
Sequoia Union High School District, where excellence is our baseline through service, equity, and leadership. Next up, we are proud to acknowledge the Sequoia Union High School District and High School Young Feminist Club. Principal Priest.
Thank you, Superintendent Williams, trustees. It is a privilege tonight, especially in light of International Women's Day yesterday. It is as fitting a time as ever to recognize our exceptional Young Feminist Club. So let's step back and recognize the contributions made by Zariah King, Sabrina Solon, Becca Rosenberg, and Club President Sarah Hansen in their efforts to educate, advocate, and enrich the Sequoia High School community. The Young Feminist Club at Sequoia has led school-wide efforts to make information about sexual harassment available to more students. This has included a streamlining of the process for reporting sexual harassment to administration. They've placed free feminine hygiene products in all classrooms as part of their broad effort to destigmatize conversations about menstruation through education and outreach. Hear, hear. They have presented to staff and students, and they've made Sequoia High School a safer, more inclusive place. With recognition also for their excellent staff advisor, Mosi DaCosta Pinto, I am proud tonight to salute the efforts of our students. Sarah, Becca, Zariah, and Sabrina, thank you, thank you, thank you.
And Principal Priest, you have certificates to share with our wonderful students and certificate of recognition. The Sequoia Union High School District Board of Trustees proudly recognizes Sequoia Union High School, et al., for your exceptional leadership, advocating efforts, and outstanding hard work to educate the Sequoia High School community as part of the Young Feminist Club. Each member will receive a certificate. And again, thank you for your leadership and thank you for all the work that the students have done and your support of them.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. There's nothing better than our recognitions. Makes us so proud of the work that's being done in our district. Okay, now we are on to item 9, our student trustee comments.
All right, thank you so much, everyone. The Student Advisory Committee. Oh, sorry. Not very techy. The Student Advisory Committee met yesterday and discussed how students are feeling in regards to the possibility of lifting the mask mandate. Carlos and I will share their exact thoughts and questions later on during the COVID mitigation action item. However, the vast majority of students were in support of removing the mask mandate and instead moving to masks as strongly recommended. Students also had some additional questions, which we will later ask on their behalf, and we are very grateful that Dr. Williams was able to attend our meeting to answer most of these questions. Finally, I would like to congratulate both the MA Chronicle and the Scott Scoop for being nominated as 2022 NSBA Online Pacemaker finalists. Out of the entire country, only 47 papers were chosen as finalists, 2 in this district. Very impressive. Also, additionally, MA Menlo Atherton boys basketball team won CCS for the first time in 30-something years. So very big congratulations to them.
I wish mine was as brief. Bear with me. So today I'd like to address the elephant in the room and what is on everyone's mind, students included, and everybody here. Yes, I did get a haircut. Just kidding. This is not a haircut. On a more serious note, there's an issue that's on everyone's mind, which is the mask mandate. It's going away up and down our state and all around our country. People are nervous and students are nervous. Our job, Isabel's and mine, is to represent our peers and advocate for them on the highest level in this district before this body. We look forward to the coming discussion, and we look forward to participating in that discussion. First and foremost, we just want to say we believe in science. We believe in the protection of our community members and our peers and the students of SUHSD. But most importantly, we believe that our teachers are heroes. So thank you to those of you that are teachers in this room. Sorry, lost my place here. This is what happens when you prepare a mammoth of a student trustee comment. Recently, I had the privilege of going on the Sojourn trip to the Deep South and visiting some of the most momentous sites in the civil rights movement. And I got to stand on march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and stand just in front of the spot where Dr. King was assassinated. I realized that the most important work, the good trouble, as the late John Lewis would say, only happens when we all come together, when we all work together for the common good, and when we all put aside our differences and can just agree on stuff, which is becoming increasingly difficult, unfortunately, in the state of our country. I ask those of us here who are waiting to participate in the oncoming discussion regarding masks and the best way forward to just remember that we're all here for the same purpose. We all care about the education of our students, of people like Isabel and I, and all the other people that can't be represented here as well as we are. I ask those of us, we all want what's best for our students, educators, and community members. So thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for listening, but most important, thank you for your commitment to the highest quality education the school district and community can provide to the students of our district. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments. Okay, now we are on item 10, comments from the Sequoia District Teachers Association.
I think it's patently unfair that you asked me to go after Carlos. And I was going to talk about teacher burnout. Now I don't feel like it because I was inspired. See, Sean, it does happen every once in a while. On positive notes, I was here the last time to celebrate the ratification of our collective bargaining agreement, and I am here today excited that we're taking the steps towards implementing some of the new things, including finding and calendaring our 5 minimum days next year to have PD on really important topics that have been set aside in the agreement. I think one of the things that can combat teacher burnout and caregiver burnout in schools is the opportunities to come together, learn new things, implement those new things, and do things better. So we're very much looking forward to doing that. And I'm here to brag a little about some actions that the SDTA Legislative Council have taken. We provided, at the request of our organizing committee, a $5,000 grant to support the work of the Sequoia Union High School District affinity groups. Thank you. And we are donating $1,200 to the BSU Black Graduation Celebration at the end of the year. So we are underwriting the cost of Kente schools and cookies. We're very excited about the cookies part. So we're looking forward very much to both of those moving forward. And I'm sure I'll be back talking about something else soon.
Thank you very much. All right, and is there anybody here from the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees? Anybody in our Zoom audience? I don't see anybody, so I will move on to public comment. So this is for items that are not on the agenda. If you're in the Zoom audience, you can raise your Zoom hand. And if you're in our live audience, you can fill out a speaker's card. And I do have a speaker card for Carol Ann Coleman. Now you can come up. And just a reminder that there is a 3-minute timer on.
Okay, yeah, I'll make this brief because you already got the intro. Good evening, Superintendent Williams, President Dubois, members of the board, and cabinet members. I wanted to just bring up 2 things quickly. As I said, my doctor said I cannot do summer school this year for my mental health. So he actually wrote me a prescription saying you cannot do summer school. So I'm here to just, and it's probably already been done because I know the wonderful, excellent Bonnie Hanson is on top of this. The summer school, I'm just concerned about our students who will be required to go to summer school for either failed classes or, as some people call it, a learning loss. In order for students to have the capacity and the bandwidth to attend summer school, I personally experienced this. A lot of the students weren't fed until 11 a.m. in the morning. And I think it's really hard for us to expect our students to be at school at 8 a.m. on an empty stomach and perform. So that was just my only thing. A couple students mentioned that to me as well. Anyway, so there's that. And then I was manifesting and brainstorming, and then someone informed me that maybe this is something that's already going on. I was wondering if we could create a space for every school for the kid that's just not feeling it. And not necessarily a kid who needs to go and have mental health services provided, but just they're afraid to go to that class because they're tardy and they're afraid to walk into the class because either everyone will look at them or they'll be ostracized or someone will go, that person's late, look at that. So that they can actually go to a place with grace and lean into their learning. I've had several conversations with students in the hallway, just not feeling it. And with my just leaning into them and listening to these students, they are having great difficulty still in the pandemic with leaning into school and feeling good about it. So I just want to create a space where kids can go to feel good about themselves, grab a snack, and then bounce right back into school, their class, and maybe teach them essential fundamental skills where they feel like they have the power to walk into a class, even if maybe they're late for personal reasons, knowing that they're getting their education and educating our teachers, just saying, hey, it's great to see you, instead of saying, why are you late? Just giving them grace and love. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. And I do see a Zoom hand that is up now. Abby Corman.
Hi, my name is Abby Corman. I'm an English teacher at MA. I teach English 1 and English 2 intensive, and I have many sophomores who I'm sadly nervous about their pathway to graduation. Unfortunately, their first year of high school was during the pandemic, and the already difficult transition to high school was made much more difficult by distance learning. I believe many of my students have so few credits, they will need to go to Redwood next year to get caught up. And I imagine my students are not alone in the district. I'm hopeful to hear from the district of the summer programming being planned this year, and if there's anything new that will be added to account for the probably large number of credit deficient students. Although I am assuming it's a larger number of credit deficient students now in district than we have had before because of the pandemic. And so with that assumption, I guess I wonder, do we have a report on student grades to show if we do or do not have more credit deficient students than in years past? And I'm also wondering, as I think maybe Carol Ann is too, will we have a report on summer school about what our supports look like for those students coming up this summer? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on, I don't see any other hands. So if some of you tuned in late, we rearranged our agenda to put the COVID update at the top, because we know there's a high degree of interest in this topic. So I will turn it over to our superintendent.
Thank you, everyone. Again, good evening. And we do know that this is a topic that is impacting everyone. And I want to say, as Dr. Chacon comes forward to give us an overview in terms of where we are with our COVID mitigation protocols and strategies, which will include face covering, I would just like to say that as a district, we have done a pretty decent job, I will say, in terms of managing from the perspective of the school district, our COVID situation. And with that, one reason that we were able to accomplish this so successfully, if you will, is because we have maintained and followed the guidelines provided by CDC and also our healthcare partners. And so this evening, as we come to you with our presentation and our updates in terms of vaccination rates, also mask coverings, and then mitigation protocols, which will continue outside of the decision regarding masking, that we would all remember to remain open-minded, kind to one another, and also enter into a spirit of restoration. COVID conversations have taken a toll on our entire community, our school community, and we know that without students, we do not exist. Without teachers, we do not exist. Without our staff members, we do not exist. And so this is a point for us as a community, as a family, to have a reset as we move forward and we start to anticipate and look for post-pandemic healing. And so thank you, Dr. Chacon, for sharing our collective thoughts and vision for our district as we move forward.
Thank you. And thank you for that introduction, and good evening to President Dubois and board members. And also thank you to our student trustees for their voices around this issue too. Also advocating for kindness and understanding as we look towards a new era with COVID. And so on February 28th, the California Department of Public Health did release updated masking guidance for schools, essentially under the new universal masking requirement. Beginning on March 12th, which is next Saturday, we are shifting to a strong recommendation that students, teachers, and others continue to mask while in indoor school settings. Typically, we follow what CDPH says and what San Mateo County Health says.
And so I also want to note that San Mateo County Health has now aligned itself with CDPH also and confirmed that once the statewide requirement ends, which is on March 11th, masks will be strongly recommended in all public and private schools in the county. So masks have been required in our schools up to this point, and data has shown the efficacy of wearing masks. In California, which has been very strict with their required masking, shows that 12% of the student population in the United States is in California, yet only 1% of school closures that took place nationally during the Delta surge in July and August of 2021 happened here. Most were in jurisdictions where masking requirements weren't in place. They definitely experienced larger increase in pediatric case rates, and school outbreaks there were 3.5 times more likely than they were in areas without school mask requirements. We will note that while masks were required, other recommendations were just that. They were just recommendations. The recommendations that we had for staff and students to test regularly, we weren't mandating it. The recommendations that we had for students to be vaccinated, again, not a mandate, not a requirement, but a recommendation. And so as the state is saying they are moving to a strong recommendation, once again, it is just that, not a requirement now, they're moving towards recommendation. We also want to note that Cal OSHA also has changed and aligned the guidance with that, saying that it will no longer require, but strongly recommend that masks be worn even by unvaccinated workers. And this is to help alleviate any possible confusion that it might create if we say masking is recommended yet, ... This is what will allow students and staff to be able to align under all the same strong recommendation for masking in the coming months. So this is just some of the direct language that I've spoken to. I won't read this aloud, but it's just essentially a strong recommendation to wear masks indoors because the statewide requirement is sunsetting. So why now? The reason that CDPH and San Mateo County Health are saying that we are moving from required masking to strongly recommended masking is because they are basing their decisions on science and on data, and they include case hospitalization rates, and conditions are continuing to improve, as has been mentioned a few times already this evening. And so they're moving towards less restrictive guidance. However, it has also been noted that if the state experiences another spike, whether due to unmasking or anything else, then CDPH could pivot back to requiring masks in school, moving again from strong recommendation back to requirement. So what does that look like right now? As of March 12th, we'd be moving into a strong recommendation because the feeling is that it's a COVID safe decision. It's tied to contact tracing and quarantining, and again, follows the strongly recommended language. The thought is that if that goes well, and if we don't end up needing to pivot back into requirement due to the data, that CDPH will then move to recommended. An expectation could be that that could happen within 30 days, maybe in April. Again, we don't know. That's going to depend on continual review of the data. And then further on, possibly in May, maybe for next school year, they're going to move into just optional for everyone. So the rationale for maintaining masks in school, again, we are still moving it not into fully optional. It is optional, but it's very much labeled with this terminology, specifically strongly recommended. It's because other COVID protocols are intertwined with mask wearing. It does continue to protect unvaccinated students, to protect those with vulnerable health issues. And so when we say strongly recommended, we mean that people should continue to wear masks indoors. They don't have to, but they should. And that's a direct quote from the San Mateo County Health Office. It also helps for the protection of those in the 5 to 11-year-old category, because there was a report released saying they're not sure how effective vaccinations are for that age group. And so again, we want to continue to protect all of our community, even, brothers and sisters, nieces and nephews, everyone in our community and families. Again, when it turns to recommended, that will be based on data expected within 30 days or so. We are continuing with many of our other protocols. This is just specific to masking. People will notice that if cases occur, they're going to continue to get the COVID exposure case notifications. And that's because AB 86 still has not sunsetted. It's continuing. So with or without the mask, people will be getting exposure notices. So just know that you'll continue to see those. And although the new mask language is targeted at individuals rather than institutions, they do say, you know, this is a decision of the local education agencies. And that's why we're having this conversation this evening. Protocols are moving to a quarantine model and exposure notification model. And we will continue to lean on testing, which I'll talk about our testing opportunities in a little while, especially after exposure and symptoms. We are still encouraging those with symptoms to stay home and get tested. Sports, however, it's still under discussion with rationale that sports is a higher risk setting. Again, that will be determined by the state, by the San Mateo County Office of Health. Masks there are also just strongly recommended, but everything else that we're doing with sports should continue. So safety, we do have multi-layered mitigation strategies. We have vaccines. We have a strong testing program. Again, I'll highlight that in a minute. Our good ventilation systems in the schools. Masks have been key to ensuring our stability. And we continue to encourage students and adults to wear a mask, get tested, and if you're eligible, to get a vaccine. So let's look at some of the data. As I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons that we are going to strong recommendation in line with the county and in line with the state is because we can see in our own data that cases have fallen significantly. You know, at the start of the year, I'll just look at the student cases because it represents a larger population, but you can see in September, we were up to 26 reported student cases, and it sort of hovered around that area until it really climbed in December, January, February. And as you all remember, that's when we were facing Omicron. Since then, through testing and other mitigation strategies and continued masking, cases have now fallen, and we, this month, through Thursday, March 3rd, we had 9 student cases reported and 6 staff cases reported. So it's a significant difference. We're really proud of these numbers, proud of our community, and, you know, even beyond pride of us being able to manage this. I think it's just the idea that it does add that element and that feeling of safety in our community, which is nice. So current vaccination rates, our staff, currently the numbers we have, a total of 1,548 staff members are vaccinated. That's 87% approximately. And with student vaccinations, this number has been a little more tricky. We don't require or necessarily request students or say that they need to tell us if they've been vaccinated. What we do is we go into the CARE database, which is the California Immunization Registry, and we have to look it up one student at a time to see if they have had no vaccination, 1 shot, 2 shots, or 2 shots and a booster. It is an incredibly time-consuming process, and I want to give a shout out to Alexia, one of our health aides, who has been spending a lot of time digging around in this registry to get us numbers. These numbers are also ever changing because, of course, a student can move from not having a vaccine to having a vaccine. And so it's just an iterative process. And whenever she has a chance, she goes in that database and continues to look up students. So this number isn't a clean number, but it's a close number. We're looking at, about 82% of our students, 83% of our students who have both shots or both shots and a booster. So it's a pretty high rate. Like I said, I would highlight the testing. We do continue to have robust COVID testing. We do have slots available. You can go online, make a reservation, show up. It's different days at different sites, available at all sites throughout the course of the week and or throughout the course of the month. You can go in and get a test. We encourage everybody to do it, especially if you're feeling like you might have symptoms or might have been exposed. It's a good idea to get tested. We are also offering post-isolation antigen testing for our employees. Gary from Worksite Labs and I did a presentation a couple a couple months ago about what that was going to look like. Essentially, instead of having a drive-through at very specific locked-in times where employees had to come do their post-isolation test, now what they can do is they can go online, make an appointment, come pick up a test from just a lockbox we have outside here, and go home, and then have their test when is convenient for them while it's being watched through telemedical appointment. And the reason we're doing that is because in order to comply with the testing requirements of ETS, a test can't be both self-administered and self-read unless it's observed by a health professional or an employer, an authorized employer. So this is our way of offering that to employees so they can both get coached on how to do the test and have a reading that then Worksite Labs can help report to us. And what it's happening is it's just helping people get back to work a lot faster. Otherwise, if you don't do a test, you have to stay out the full 10 days of quarantine. With a test, you could say, hey, my symptoms have gone away. It's been 5 days. I'm going to give this a shot. And it's helping us just keep staff and keep teachers in classroom. And so it's been a good program. And it hasn't had been used a lot, which is great because like I showed, the numbers have gone down significantly. So this is just the outline for doing that through Worksite Labs. If any staff is interested, we also have this link to our website. It is there. All this information is there for you. And that is where we are with the COVID update, unless Dr. Williams wanted to add anything else. Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Any questions?
Thank you so much. If we have any questions, or would you like to go to public comment? Is everybody okay with that? Public comment? Okay.
All right. Thank you.
So again, if you would like to make a comment on this item, if you're in the Zoom audience, please raise your Zoom hand. I do have 2 speaker cards from our live audience, so I'll start with those. First speaker is Jennifer Carson.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jennifer Carson. I'm a teacher at MA. I've been in our district for upwards of 25 years now, and I'm kind of a geek who goes to board meetings. So here we are, back in person. Thank you, first of all, for all the time and energy and emotion put forward by our district and our site staffs related to our current COVID protocols. Though not perfect, our schools have been up and running all year with students in school and teachers working again under exceptional circumstances. I am proud of the work our sites are doing every day and feel confident that we are ready for mask choice. In fact, based on what I see on campus, I would be surprised if many students remove their mask on Monday at all. The vast majority still wear them even outside during the day. And I worry deeply about the number of students who are literally hiding behind their masks and their hoods. The part that feels familiar to me is the sense of anxiety and excitement for what's next. Last year, we needed to practice being on campus, even if it was just for 1 quarter, so that we would be emotionally ready for August. And it worked. Similarly, we need to start unmasking this spring so that we can support those that are nervous and gradually continue our return to smiles. Thank you again for aligning with CDPH and the San Mateo County Health Authorities, who both recommend mask choice.
Thank you. Next speaker, Edith Salvatore.
Hello. I come to you today not with a recommendation from SDTA about what your decision should be. We have many members who are nervous about the specter of maskless classes and the potential impact that that could have on individual and community health. We have probably equally as many members who are eagerly anticipating the opportunity to engage with students without masks as a barrier. We have a third group, like me, who are in the middle of that Venn diagram. We want to thank the district for providing information about vaccination levels to help staff and students make informed decisions about masking, and for maintaining robust testing opportunities on campus for students and staff. We want to point out that while the numbers have gone down from the Omicron peak, if you look at those numbers in the presentation, there are 6 staff and 9 student cases through 3 days of March, compared with 6 staff and 26 student cases through 30 days of September. Throughout the COVID pandemic, we've had a pattern of comparing where we are to where we've just been. And after Delta, we looked at how much better we were doing, and we could open up our economy, and we were at the exact same community levels that we had been at the very beginning of lockdown. It just felt better because it was better than what we had just been through. I'm not here to ask you to make a decision one way or the other. I do hope you keep all of these issues, those that Ms. Carson just brought up, those that I'm sure you are about to hear, and those that I've mentioned in mind when you make your decision. SDTA's official ask is that whatever you decide tonight, that decision be made clearly and unequivocally, and that it be communicated to staff, students, and the community clearly and promptly, so that everyone knows what is expected and what is allowed, and that we can prepare for that prior to implementation, potentially on Monday. Doesn't give us a long runway. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I will move on to our Zoom audience. First speaker, Greg Schmidt.
Good evening, President Dubois, Superintendent Williams, board members. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. This pandemic has been hard on all of us. I am still surprised by the unexpected ways that we are being affected. I've been masked around my family since August, sleeping and eating in a trailer just so I can show up for my students. For 1/5 of my daughter's life, since the beginning of the school year, she's only seen me in a mask or on a screen. As an immunocompromised person, I expected this year to be tough, but I was not fully prepared for the number of precautions and sacrifices I would be forced to take to keep myself and my unvaccinated toddler at home as safe as possible. You see, the medication I take for a medical condition weakens my immune system, leaving me more susceptible because my vaccine is not effective. I have an underlying medical condition that affects my lungs, putting me at a greater risk and a higher risk category for poor outcomes. At school, I've been wearing an N95 mask covered with a cloth or paper mask and a face shield all day. On work days, I wear a mask for 9 to 14 hours while on campus. I'm currently in my 13th hour today. We are all going through fatigue. We all know that masks add challenges to teachers and students, but I'm not able to ignore the risks that teaching unmasked students will bring. I want to continue to serve my students to the best of my ability. Removing the safety net of student masks will make it difficult to do so, as I will be wary of my health and that of my unvaccinated family. As much as I try, my masks and personal precautions are not perfect. I rely on the behavior of others around me to help reduce my risk. The fact that my students are unmasked and taking hand hygiene seriously in my classroom gives me peace of mind to do my job effectively. And the thought of being in an enclosed space with 30+ unmasked students for long stretches of time without knowing whether they are up to date with the booster scares me. If students are unmasked, that fear will be constant and will make it harder to serve my students. This fear is shared by some students, impeding their ability to focus as well. Thank you for letting me share my concerns with you. I know that my story may be unique, but this is not just about me. Our oldest students and staff may have waning protection from the vaccine, and the booster rates in the Bay Area are not great. Our youngest students, 5 to 11, have a vaccination rate around 30%, and we know that that vaccine has been proven to be less effective than desired. And there is not yet a safe and effective vaccine for non-school age children. Masks in school help these groups stay safer, which should be our goal. Science says good quality, well-fitting masks protect everyone, not just the wearer. I would love to ask you not to take this layer of protection away. I don't think that's going to happen. But while the plan may be to take the mandate away, please recognize the unintended negative consequences of this action and how it might affect our most vulnerable in our population. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next speaker, Heidi Bravo. Heidi, did you want to speak? Okay.
Hi, this is Trisha Barr. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Sorry, thanks for that feedback. My name is Trisha Barr, and I'm a parent of 3 kids, one of whom is at MA now. Thank you, board, superintendent, staff, admin, and teachers for ensuring in-person learning this year. It's been critical for our students. I really appreciate the teacher's comment earlier. I believe her name is Jennifer Nelson. I think what she says about kids hiding behind masks is what I've heard from others as well. Thank you also for the staff recommendation that we as a district align with the state and county to let the mask mandate expire, while emphasizing that whether people decide to wear a mask or not, everyone should be respected in their choice. I saw a slide from the MPCSD board meeting where my youngest is that I think sums up the situation well. It said, we see a shift in data and approach at the national, state, and local level, transitioning from pandemic to endemic, from public health responsibility to personal responsibility, from risk avoidance to risk management. I think that says it all. And after what is almost exactly 2 years, or it will be by the time the state mandate expires this week, it's time to let the mask mandate expire so kids no longer hide behind the masks, or at least have that choice, because it has had an impact on everyone's mental health. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. I wanted to ask the student trustees if they wanted. Oh, okay. Thank you. Sharon Bologna.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hi. Thank you, Superintendent, Board President, and Board of Trustees. I would just like to say that I hope when you make your communication after your decision tonight, that you would clearly state to the parents, the students, to please stay home if they're not feeling well, since we know that the symptoms for COVID are similar to symptoms of a cold or a flu. Working in the office for the last 20 years, I've seen kids come through first thing in the morning, not feeling good and wanting to go home before 8 o'clock. So I just implore people to please be on the cautious side and keep their kids home if they're not feeling good. Thank you.
Thank you. Satiz?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you so much again for the in-person learning this year, and also for supporting mask choice. I think Monday is going to be a great day for all the kids that can't wait to ditch the masks while being fully supportive for those that are not yet ready. Tonight, I would like to provide maybe a little public service, share what I have learned from an amazing group of highly qualified doctors that have gathered and presented a lot of research in a very open, transparent, and easy to understand way. The group is called the Urgency of Normal. Some of you maybe have heard about it. The website is urgencyofnormal.com for anyone listening that is interested. I think many of them are local doctors, and I believe quite a few of them are parents as well. So I wanted to highlight some of their findings that I think are very pertinent to the topic of mandatory masking. First and foremost, COVID is a flu-like risk to unvaccinated children. The source that this group cited was the CDC's own data. Yet the CDC does not issue a masks or strongly recommended bulletin at the beginning of every flu season, not that I've seen at least. And COVID risk to vaccinated healthy children is even lower. And teachers, staff, and family members are well protected by vaccination with a booster dose, important for older age groups. Protecting the mental, social, and emotional health of students should be our top priority. So these are some of the summations of all the research that they've done, and I provided the website so everybody can really dig into the data themselves. In terms of student masking, I will read verbatim what these doctors are saying. Student masking has, the quote, student masking has no scientifically established benefit in real world use. When an intervention's real world benefits are too small to measure, we should feel comfortable ending its use. Potential harms from long-term masking are poorly understood, and reports on mask removal have noted social and emotional benefits for students. Moving to mask optional policies and increasing school-based support and interventions for children will be crucial for student mental health. We recommend an immediate end to mandatory masking. Anyone who wants or needs to continue using a mask is free to do so, end quote. I would like to conclude by saying I fully support choice. Everybody should be highly respectful of individual students, staff, teachers' decisions on this matter. And again, greatly appreciate that we're moving forward in a mass choice environment. Thanks so much.
Thank you. So we're at our past our 10-minute limit for public comment. So I'm going to take one more. Mary Alice Davis, that'll be our last public comment.
Hi, thank you. My name is Mary Alice Davis. I am a teacher at Sequoia. Thank you, everyone, for listening and thinking and going with science and data. I'm a science teacher. I spend a lot of time asking students to share the evidence. I also have to say that I am one of those pesky people who has a funky immune system, and I'm really scared about walking into a room of unmasked people. I'm really scared about what it's going to look like if in my most panicked moments, I walk into a room on Monday and there are no masks except for mine, and a student raises their hand. I don't know how to navigate that process. So I ask for your help and for your support and for your guidance in how folks across the mask and spectrum and comfort and all of this stuff can work together and to continue to build a community where we come from a lot of different places, but our goal is to learn together and to make progress. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I'll move on to student trustees. Do you have comments?
Yes, we do. I actually have a couple questions for Mr. Cohn, if that would be possible. Oh, Dr. Chacon, yeah. So the California Department of Public Health and the San Mateo Department of Public Health, their recommendation of strongly recommended, that's the same for vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals?
Yes.
Okay, and then I don't know if anyone really knows this, but when they say like, oh, eventually we'll move, we will probably move down to recommended and then to optional. Is there like a case cutoff? What do they want the R rate to be lower? Like what's kind of what's gonna?
It's a good question, and I don't have that information as to what would trigger the next step. I can look into that though and see if there is some sort of specific data that would bring them down to the next level.
Okay, thank you so much. And then, so kind of moving on, those are my questions. We talked, Dr. Williams was there at the Student Advisory Committee meeting yesterday. Our entire meeting was about this. And all the students at that meeting were in agreement that they were in support of lifting the mask mandate and moving to strongly recommended. They felt that was kind of prudent given the direction of case rates. However, one student in the advisory committee did email me and asked if I would read their email to you. This is from Julian Sierra, who said, my thoughts about lifting the mask mandate in schools is that it's inappropriate at this time. And the only reason is why it's being considered is because of the major backlash from a certain group of adults, putting all of the youth and their family members at risk, which some of these families already live in areas that are more exposed to pollution than others, meaning that some of these people may have pre-existing conditions, putting them at higher risk of death. Lifting the mask mandate affects those who have no choice but to go to work and class and can be around people who are maskless and just hope that they don't catch it. So that was from one of the members of the Student Advisory Committee.
Well, after hearing, I'll start with this. I hear very different things from very different people. Our job is to represent students and to magnify their voices here. And the one little anecdote I want to share with everybody is that I've never had really students come up to me in the capacity of me being their representative here. When they found out that I was their representative here, one of their representatives here, I had a flurry of them come to me. They said, will you please, and the vast majority, and I'm not saying this represents a majority of people in our district, students in our district, but those who spoke to me came to me, one of them almost on the verge of tears, saying, will you please tell them that we need masks still? They tell me, I live with my grandparents. They're ill. I've got younger siblings who can't be vaccinated yet or can't be vaccinated, period. Some of them have parents, aunts, uncles, folks who live with them. And while I don't know really how things are going to go, I can't predict. None of us can predict whether or not there will be a wave, a new wave. I just do want to be cognizant of those people. I've got 2 little sisters myself who can't be vaccinated yet because they're too young. And I wear my mask. I'm going to continue to wear my mask. And the other thing I wanted to point out was that we can all notice there's a divide between the adults who are speaking out. Those who are teachers are strongly, well, not all of them. I can't say all of them, but a lot of them are very concerned. They're the ones who are on the front lines. And we've heard here and elsewhere that teachers are not comfortable. They're scared even, and perfectly reasonably, to go into their classrooms on Monday and teach to what can be a room full of unmasked students. We've heard the data now. We've heard what folks have to say. And it's really hard to come to this decision. I mean, for me, trying to represent all nearly 10,000 students in our district, with Isabel and I here to represent them, it's not easy to accurately do that. Didn't come here with a set opinion. I wanted to hear everybody, and I'd still like to hear what everybody else has to say. And I'd just like to really put that on the table. And if there's more to say later, I'll say more. But for now, this is it.
Thank you for your comments. Isabel, I just wanted to make sure I heard you correctly. I thought I heard you say that a majority of the students at your council are in favor of lifting?
Every student at the Student Advisory Committee was in favor of removing the mask mandate.
Removing the mask mandate.
So I would say, as you can tell, of the people, I was like kind of in a different experience from Carlos. Most of the people who have come up to me about this meeting and kind of knowing that it's that this is what we'll be talking about have told me that they think the mask mandate is no longer makes sense. If you don't have to wear a mask in a store, if their parents don't have to wear a mask in their office, why are we still being told we have to wear masks in school? And so I would say students are also fairly divided upon it. Most of the students say, well, I'll probably still wear mine, but people should have the option not to. At least that's been my experience. And yeah, so I would say it's fairly divided.
Okay. Thank you for clarifying that. Okay, I will turn to the board. Shanice?
Mine are more just comments. First, Dr. Chacon, did you do any research? I know I did a pre-question of which districts are around us are dropping the mask mandate or going to strongly recommended, which giving mask choice. Are there any districts that are not?
So I can take that
Okay,
question.
thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So in my discussion with my superintendent colleagues, the majority are moving forward with the recommendation to align to the CDC and also the CPHD and the county recommendation. So the
So
majority of my,
there's no district not going against the strongly recommendation.
there may be, they all have not voted.
Oh, okay.
They're
then.
making the recommendation. So I cannot answer that
Okay.
at this time.
Okay. I guess this is one of the things I've been kind of struggling with as far as it just brings up a division in our community again for us. And that I really tossed and turned about this one, not because of COVID, but more so about people invalidating other people's experiences and feelings. I hear there's a Normacy website that talks about it. That's wonderful. We have the COVID website that talks a lot about the statistics and the number. What it doesn't give an account to is people's lived experiences, which is their data. So no matter what Bonnie is doing over there, I have my own data because I live my own experience, and I'm just picking on Bonnie because I know I can. And so there is this piece of my own lived data, who died in my family, who lived, my own medical condition, whatever that is. And so sometimes looking outside of ourselves is really difficult because we see our need, right? And so I went to the webinar that we do as part of our district through the Parent Education Series. And Dr. Phyllis Fagel talked about, how parents can help kids and themselves build resilience during and after the pandemic. And one of the things she talked about is really strategies that shows patience, empathy, understanding towards others, right? And so what I hear Carlos talking about, I think after I really process what I'm really kind of tossing and turning and I feel sick right now and want to cry, is wondering how people are going to act towards other people who exercise their right. So something that stood out for me is that we are not going back to normal. And I know the last board before I came on board would say things and people would be like, I don't want to hear that, right? Because it's not what we want to hear, but it's what we need to hear is that we're not going to ever go back to pre-pandemic. We're going to have it grained in the brain architect and our body architect, and you can look it up for trauma, that we will always have this experience. And so we'll never go back to where we were before. So with that said, being able to acknowledge where we are, which is we're transitioning into endemic state, and that this will continue to be something we have to deal with in the fall and that we can plan for and all kinds of stuff. So when I think about normal and that it's all relative about who's talking about it being normal, that one of the things that stood out for me is how can we honor people's choices? When I get an email from a teacher who has a compromised immune system, having a daughter that has a compromised immune system, taking off the mask is really, really scary. So how do we help some of our parents if a teacher decides they're going to wear a mask or a double mask because they want to protect themselves or they want to have a shield, that they are not criticized for their choices, right? That we honor that. Or if a student says, hey, I have my great grandmother and someone else at home and I decide to double mask as a student while everybody else is doing their thing, that I am not criticized for making that choice for myself. And I wonder, in preparation for the change, I would love to delay it 2 days so that we can actually do some education around standards of behavior so that teachers and kids can be together learning this information and hopefully transitioning, like, what can you do and prep for taking off the mask for some people so that they're all on the same page, not invalidating each other's experience, that we're coming in doing this as a community. So when I think about this, I'm ready for the mask, but I'm gonna be honest, I'll probably be wearing mine and encouraging my kid to continue to wear theirs, just because I know some people look at themselves, not necessarily the impact on others. So I'm going to put that out there.
You said you were ready for the mask. You mean you mean you're
I'm
ready
ready for the mask to come off for
to come
some
off? Okay.
families. Sorry, I wasn't clear. But I know
okay.
for myself, I'll probably keep mine on and I'll encourage my daughter to. But I don't want people's experiences be invalidated because someone else wants to exercise their right. And I think we can be a model for other districts around the country where we don't have to make this a division thing, but we do have to stand in the spot of, just because there's a website out there and data, it does not change my lived experience, my fear, the deaths that I've seen, the beds that I've been on because I, had 10 days of it instead of 5 like everybody else, that other people have flu-like symptoms or no symptoms at all, right? It was just in the test. And so I want to get to a place where we validate people's experience and yet go by the strongly recommendations. But I also would like to see at least 2 days transition so that everybody can be on the same page. And there be strong policy around people who are sick need to stay at home. And I think that is really important because we even seen it in our district office and other places where people came in sick and then everybody else gets sick too. And even though that's the real Western way you go until you just break down, that is not this kind of condition that you continue to push through and expose, because actually it creates more of a communicable disease. So just want to put that out there. That's what I'm thinking.
Thank you. Chris?
I'll start by saying I think I'm in agreement to a considerable degree with your conclusion. So I'll cycle back to that. I wanted to start out by saying I think our student trustees framed the issue beautifully for us. And if we said nothing more than repeat your words, that might be enough. I do want to repeat what Carlos told us, because I think it's really, because I agree, and I hope I express it in a similar way, which is to say that we acknowledge the authenticity of these diversity of views, and we figure out a way to respectfully navigate that conversation. That seems really important. Other 2 things I picked up as reminders is the other was belief in science. And I can't tell you how many days in listening to the national conversation, I'm glad we live in a community that believes in science. I think that helps us out a lot here. And then the third thing, the final thing that I wrote down that you said, which was we think of teachers as our heroes. I would guess if you talk to most of the board, a primary motivation for us serving on the board is because we think of teachers as heroes. So thank you for that. I see this as a difficult issue, but interestingly, the action proposed before the board, I don't think is so difficult. And specifically, the language is to continue to follow the state and county public health guideline recommendations. I have to tell you, I would find it very difficult for us to take issue, and especially at a time when there's general alignment between the national, the state, and the local health issues. We are not the experts in this. I think we do rely upon them. I acknowledge that lived experience can be different and influence how we look at those things, but I think probably the best place to take that concern is to our county public health officials. So I am going to support this action primarily because it's supporting the recommendations that come from our state and county health. The final thing, this will cycle back to 2 things you said. Many times I think the work of the board is relatively easy in establishing policy. It's the administration that makes it difficult. I want to mention 2 things in particular. One, I think we do need to pay special attention to immunocompromised teachers and students. And I think the board should actually ask the superintendent for a list of what's going on. We heard reminders to stay home would be one thing, but what else can we do? The other, I think, difficult implementation issues that'll happen on sites has to do with what does a strong recommendation mean? And I think the more guidance that can come from staff, I imagine principals will be thinking through this. How do we not push, how is there not peer pressure to do one thing or another? How do we continue to use that? Well, what does that strong recommendation actually mean in practice? And we're pushing that off to our schools, but that's probably the best place for it to be handled. So supportive of the action, hoping the superintendent will report back to us on measures to protect the immunocompromised and some indication of what a strong recommendation means. Thank you.
So my starting point is very much what Chris has just said, and echoing Shanice. This district has worked very hard throughout the last 2 years, and I think that the milestone fact that this Sunday represents 2 exact calendar years since our schools were shut down, and the day following represents the start of a new era. We have worked very hard to remove our school district from the responsibility, the misplaced responsibility of being a healthcare decision maker and aligning ourselves with the guidance from the CDC, from the California Department of Public Health, from the county public health department and the county office of education. All 4 of those groups are now in alignment that we should move from mandated masking to strongly recommended masking. And as Chris said, I don't think it's a difficult decision whether or not we continue to align with the guidance we have worked so hard to align ourselves with throughout. Most of what I would like to talk about right now is that issue of strongly recommended. That doesn't mean, hey, whoopee, masks are off, it's time to dance and party like it's 1999. It means it's strongly recommended that mask wearing is continued. Masks from the very beginning of this pandemic were explained to the public. My mask protects you. Your mask protects me. We wear masks not because that's the way for a frightened individual to stay safe from other people menacing them. It's the way unknowingly infected individuals protect the community in which they live. It's a responsibility to care for others, not just your immunocompromised classmates or teachers, but the grandparents they go home to, the younger siblings they go home to, the immunocompromised who are threatened by the disease that somebody picks up that you didn't even know you were transmitting because you didn't know you had it yet. And we have seen vast amounts of breakthrough cases that were asymptomatic during this Omicron spike. There are a couple of things that I experienced, and I think many of our board members did, with other elected officials during the course of this pandemic. We met often at many of the rough parts early on, less often more recently, to share our strategies and tactics for keeping the public safe and moving through this. And every time that Dr. Scott Morrow from the County Health came to our county meetings, he said, in the long run, it is inappropriate for our public agencies to be mandating public behavior. Our long-run strategy has to be to build individual responsibility to the community. That is what the transition from mask mandating to strongly recommended masking means. We are building capacity in our students and our staff to be respectful, to be caring for the greater community. And I think it is very meaningful and a critical part of this that we are strongly recommending continued mask wearing. We have heard from a small representation of individuals who have reason to be very concerned about the impact of absence of masks. Those concerns need to be respected. We also have heard strong voices from those who feel the impact, feel the drag of having to wear masks, and they want breaks from it. Those two have to be respected. The mental health and the concern is real. But what we need to be asking, need to be encouraging, need to be strongly recommending is that sense of responsibility to community. One other thing that I got a chance to see during our early fight with the pandemic was that the county arranged a Zoom presentation from the nation of Taiwan about how dramatically well they handled the pandemic from the very beginning, keeping infection rates minuscule while continuing to operate all aspects of their society. And the presentation began with, well, of course, our society has great respect and great traditions of wearing masks when there is a widespread epidemic of this type of disease, dating back a decade or more to the SARS outbreak. And masking is a big part of their life. When the COVID outbreak was first detected, the nationwide order of mandatory masking in all environments went out. Social distancing was set up immediately. Their kids were in classrooms, socially distanced and protected by plastic boundaries and wearing masks. And the presentation they made was, well, we know how to follow these rules, so we follow the rules and society goes on. So this has not been very disruptive. We've learned a lot about following the rules to manage it. And we need to make sure that we don't try to instantly forget everything we've learned and stop doing the things that we know have been effective at keeping us safe. So the responsibility moves to the individual is what I believe here. The final bit of input that I've heard that matters most to me is that various doctors have said that if the rest of the country had followed the kind of draconian measures that were first pioneered in the Bay Area and applied very much all over California, at least 200,000 Americans would not have died of COVID during the pandemic. Our longstanding ability to take the actions we need to care for and protect our community need to become our individual responsibility. So I'm strongly in favor of moving from mandatory to strongly recommended.
Thank you. Rich?
Well, I'll say I support the recommendation exactly as worded. I think the public health officials we followed them all the way along. Shanice, you suggested additional days. I support the date. I support exactly what is proposed, which is my understanding is at 11:59 p.m. Friday. The next minute it takes effect, which is what I support and which is what I understand the recommendation to be. So I support that.
Thank you. I guess my comments, Carlos, I want to thank you for the comments that you made to us. You are here, certainly representing students, and I heard you. So often when we come to these meetings, we're not supposed to have our minds made up, right? We are supposed to take the input that we get out in the community, but we're not supposed to make our minds up until we're at this meeting, because really the conversation is to each other, right? Listening to each other. So it's really hard for me to vote against what you have recommended. So I want to tell you that it pains me, but I heard you, and you represent a lot of people in the community who do have concern. I know in the Bay Area, I shared this recently with friends. As I walk around, Shanice and I actually walked around a park to talk. Our meeting was at a park, and I was surprised there were a lot of people outside with masks on. And as I go into stores, there are a lot of people with masks on. So your words represent many people in our community. So I want to thank you for sharing and representing our community and our students. That is your role. So anyway, it pains me to say then that I will accept this recommendation because we are not health experts. So we are going to go with the recommendation of our health advisors. Shanice?
I definitely agree with our health advisors. I guess my concern is making sure everybody's on the same page. So without discussion, right, and setting the standard before we take off the mask, we actually lose people trying to set the standard after the mask has come off, because people are like, well, we're free, right? That's great. That's what we want. And we also want to be sensitive towards our neighbors and our teachers and other students. So how do we prep them for this? I guess that's the question, which is why I said the 2-day delay. I mean, I'm not tied to a number, but how do we prep them so that a teacher isn't, or a student, whether they mask or don't mask, their feelings, their choices aren't invalidated? Like, what's the expectation of behavior? It's kind of like the first day of school. Here's the expectation. You guys just don't start school. You usually do something that first day to prep people for what it is that the standard in the classroom is.
Is that a question?
It
Yeah.
is.
Okay. Okay.
So I just want to clarify your question. So you are asking, what are we prepared to do?
How are we preparing our school community to be able to basically coexist with mask and no mask at the same place? What is the expectation around behaviors? What is the expectations around choice? What is the expectation if, to deal with emotions? How are we preparing both sides of the fence about how to manage their emotions so that we're not, so the way we think and feel is how we act. And so we want to get in front of that and create some expectations. I don't know what those are because that's not part of the presentation, but just wondering.
So in preparation for the decision, regardless to which way, our team has been in conversation. And in 2 days or 3 days, we may not get it exactly right, but we are preparing a communication to go out to address some of the concerns. But the reality is, until we actually get to the spot, there will be lots of revision. Just as with wearing the mask, there were issues that we could predict and some of which we could not. And so what I want to underscore is that this is our opportunity once again to reconnect as a community, and also to show that we respect one another and our right to choice. And so if in fact it is the board's direction for us to accept and adopt the recommendations, then we know as a school district, behavior expectations, be respectful of others, be kind, make sure that we're not bullying. So those expectations are the normal expectations that we have always established at our schools and we will continue to establish. And In addition to that, we will continue to uplift and emphasize our COVID mitigation protocols. And so I think at this point for myself, the staff and the community is going to be around trust, is going to be around making sure that we follow the identified interaction and behavior strategies that we have followed the entire year. And that is be respectful, make sure that you not bully someone or criticize someone because they're different or they have a different choice. We're going to continue to underscore equity as part of someone's choice to wear a mask or not to wear a mask, depending on tonight's decision. And so my response today at 7:57 on Wednesday, March 9th, may be very different the next time we convene based on the actual interaction that students and staff and teachers will have as a result of this decision.
Maybe I'm just having a trauma reaction from the last COVID stuff. When we said respect each other, and I got emails, respect each other. Parents were calling saying, hold up, what happened? Teachers were calling. So I don't want to act like people know what that is because we don't know what their trauma reaction is going to be. So everybody might not be in their best thinking mind. And I just want to put that out there. And I'm trying to tell the truth about people's response to COVID so that we're not going into it thinking it's just going to be an email or just to say this is the behavior expectations. Maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm hypersensitive, but I know I have a very uneasy feeling, not because of the mask, lifting of the mask mandate or giving mask choice, but because of people's response to it wherever they are, what their lived experience, their own data is telling them. So I just want to put that out there. I mean, I can go vote, but you know, I just want to put that caution out there.
And that is my trauma-informed colleague. Can you tell? She's been very well trained.
Since this
Um,
is
in
an
that-
action item, would you like a motion?
That
Let me
we
just make
approve the
sure-
recommended action.
Okay, I just think there might be one more comment.
No, I was going
You guys are
to,
ready?
I'd be happy to make a
Okay.
motion on
Okay, sorry.
that proposes the action, just as worded in the agenda, that the district will continue to follow CDPH and county health guideline recommendations for COVID safety strategies, including the latest updates on the use of facial coverings in schools.
I think Rich was trying to make the motion. Are you okay?
I was, but I'm happy to second it.
Okay, so we have a first and we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Thank you very much.
In favor?
Yes.
I'm in favor. I just have my little bugaboos and I'm just gonna hold that to myself since I'm the only
Okay.
one. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Ready to move on? So we are on item number 12, information items, multi-tiered system of support.
Could I respectfully suggest that it might be a good time for a break at 8 o'clock?
Somebody is. Everybody would like, has it been 2 hours? It goes faster when you're president. Okay. Is it going slow for everybody else? All right, we will take a 5-minute break. Now I'm
I'm assuming it's still the habit it was.
It is. restricting. And I'm wondering, I think it's a discussion rather than action item, whether we could bump that up to now so we don't keep the consultant waiting.
Is that okay with everyone? So that's item 13.1.
I think that's correct.
Do we need to take a formal amendment to the agenda or just go for
I
it?
think we can just go for it, right? Okay. 13.1, which is the trustee, it's the trustee map.
It is the trustee map. Oh, okay, trustee map. Good evening. I do have a guest. Zach, I see you in the room. Are you here?
I am on audio. Can you all hear me?
Fabulous. Well, I will control the presentation. Good evening. So every 10 years when we do a census, the districts that have moved to trustee areas have to reevaluate to see if those trustee areas still fall within the regulatory guidelines within their current boundaries. And so we went to trustee areas.
What, A and B?
Back, but when did we go to from at large? Do you remember? 8 years ago?
No.
No, it would have been like 4
No,
or
it
5.
was, the first election was 4 years ago.
4 years ago. And so in the middle of a census, 10-year implement. And so in 2020, when the census came out, we got the data back in October. And tonight we are here to show where some adjustments can be made to 2 trustee areas to get us back in alignment. So the process to do that is for the district to identify a demographer, to look at our numbers, look at our boundaries, look at the census data, and then provide options for the board to discuss potentially where that they would want to move the boundary lines. We also need to do a public hearing, which will occur at the next board meeting, as well as adopt a resolution, which will also happen at the next board meeting. If any of you remember going from at large to trustee areas, it is several meetings. There are several public hearings. There are community meetings, sometimes town hall meetings. An adjustment to the boundary areas only require 1 public hearing and then the adoption of the resolution. So with all that said, we will get started. We do have Zach Worthen with Power Schools here with us tonight to present some of our options. I believe one option, the recommended option, and then we've also discussed with Trustee Sarver and Trustee Thompson, since it does affect their 2 areas, and they will also be able to weigh in later as well. So we will get started.
Okay, thank you so much for that introduction, Crystal. It's been a pleasure working with you and your staff. Thank you, community and board, for this presentation today. Just if we move on, I'm just going to provide a brief outline. We're going to just do a brief introduction just so you know who we are, who I am, who you're working with as your demographer, and then we'll move on to the challenges in those trustee area balancing, and I'll present to you your current boundaries, the population issues under California Ed Code, and the new boundary proposal. So we just want to move on to a quick introduction. I'm a representative of Power Schools Predictive Enrollment Analytics. I'm the solutions engineer who's been working with Assistant Superintendent Leach over the last few weeks to come up with these solutions. Power School is the leading provider of cloud-based education software. We're a portion of it that deals primarily in education balancing, boundary balancing, and enrollment analytics. Just a little bit about that. My name is Zach, as you've heard. I'm the solutions engineer, and I've worked with different school districts around the country, both in district offices and as a representative of Power School across the country. I've worked at the UN Development Program. I worked at the New York Department of Ed doing curriculum procurement, and I worked at Portland Public Schools helping to draw school boundaries as well as constructing and ratifying school budgets. Right now, I'm working primarily with folks like you on boundary and enrollment analytics. And what I'm here to do today is to talk to you about your trustee areas and the ways in which we're going to look at modifying those to bring them back into compliance. So the challenges with that are that California Ed Code 50195 does require school districts to evaluate their trustee areas every 10 years. When the decennial census comes out, districts are required to evaluate the residents within their districts. And if any district has a more than 10% variance between the highest and lowest trustee area representative, they are required to modify those boundaries to bring the areas into compliance. The district has worked with the county to review that census information. And those trustee boundaries have been determined by the county that there was a greater than 10% difference between at least two areas. Again, that census was conducted in 2020, that information released in September of 21, and that the county determined that given that Sequoia Union will be required to redraw those trustee boundaries. The district reached out to us as an unbiased demographer to provide an analysis of those trustee areas. We agreed with the district assessment that at least two trustee areas, and in fact, exactly two trustee areas, did in fact have a greater than 10% variance between their population counts, and hence that there would be a need to at least in some ways redraw those trustee boundaries to create a compliant map. We've provided a map solution, which we'll show you shortly, which does create legal compliance and provides minimal change. What we're looking at right now is your current boundary census populations. If you look counterclockwise, you can see the A, B, C, D, and E trustee areas, and you can see the 2020 census population count. Again, we agree within far less than a margin of error with the county on those census counts. And you can see in the share of the total and the difference off ideal that there are several trustee areas that require moderation. What we're looking at primarily is trustee area A, which as you notice is 58,580, and trustee area D, which is 47,812. Again, these are census residents of the area. And what you can see is that they are substantially 1,6,500 over and 1,4,200 under off the ideal area for those trustee areas. Now that ideal size is a very simple calculation. It's simply the number of residents of your district according to the 2020 decennial census over the number of trustees, or that number over 5. So if you were drawing this with no concerns for geography, each trustee area would be 52,070 residents. You can see the actual residents as of the 2020 decennial census. The conclusion that was made given that is that the easiest and simplest way to bring Sequoia Union into compliance with California Ed Code would be to engage in a pretty simple swap between trustee area A and trustee area D. We'll look shortly at that area is much more zoomed in to balance those two areas. If we move on to the proposal that we're talking about, what we can see is some of the information we've already covered, but this in a much clearer detail. There are two trustee areas that need to be modified to bring the district into compliance, as we looked at on the table. Trustee area A is about 6,500 residents larger than ideal. Trustee area D is about 4,300 residents smaller than ideal. Trustee areas B, C, and E are less than 2% off of that 52,070 resident ideal, and hence are legally compliant without any change. What we're proposing today is a fairly simple switch of a block of land from trustee area A to trustee area D, representing about 4,900 residents, moving them out of A and into D to create a much more balanced resident count, which provides for a legally compliant resident count. As we can see on the census population, you'll notice that trustee areas A and D are now moved much closer to each other. You see a variance of 4.8%. The California Code establishes a recommendation to change those boundaries if they're over 5 and a legal requirement if they're over 10. They were over 10, which is why we're here. We've now gotten those variances under that 5% recommendation from California Ed Code and functionally and effectively balance those trustee areas with minimal changes needed to the rest of the trustee areas. We've covered a lot of information fairly quickly here. So again, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them. And it's been my pleasure to present this information again to the board and the community of Sequoia Union High School.
Okay, any questions?
I'll just comment that I get, and not so much a question, but if we were to have started from scratch, we wouldn't have drawn the shapes the way they're being proposed. It looks like it's proposed this way, in a way, adjusting from where we are to where we need to be. A little bit, I mean, I think the word gerrymander comes from salamander, and it kind of looks like a little head of a salamander that we've now stuck onto area D. So I'm not.
Sure, I'm happy to address just briefly. There is a very different legal process between redrawing district boundaries and what we're talking about here is the balancing under California Ed Code, which is seeking to address in a non-partisan way mathematical balances, although I do understand and respect the importance of geographic visuals on maps.
Yes, I will vote yes on this, but it does seem to me that there could be like more areas affected in a shifting that ends with areas that look, when you look at the map to you understand more why they're drawn the way they are. The explanation for the map we will end up with, should we vote yes, which I'm okay supporting if everyone else supports it, but it will be, well, we had something and then we had to change it. So we changed it to this. We never would have picked this in the first place, but because of where we were, we're picking this. But anyway, maybe anyone.
Can I respond with two points? One is being careful about gerrymandering. I associate with political purpose, and there's no political purpose in the adjustment here. The other is that I think the reason I'd support it is it's hard enough for people to understand what district they're in when it used to all be at large. And the more people we shift every 10 years, I think there will be less identification with a representative from the district. And for that reason, I think just dealing with the two districts and making the change there, we're affecting the least number of people. And so I saw that as a motivating force for making this change and justifying an odd shape.
Just as a follow-up, it's possible that, say, if in the future areas A and E or B and E need to be adjusted, then they're going to have to do something really funny. So
I actually thought of the same thing, but also figured there was no way to anticipate how those districts are going to change. So we could try and make complete adjustments at this point, making it look nicer, making the numbers closer, but it might be off even more 10 years from now.
Any other questions or comments?
I would throw in that I as well. I felt that the simplest and most straightforward adjustment to come back in compliance would have the least impact on the voters as a whole. And a decade at a time, the future of the district may look at the way the map is adjusting and say, maybe it's time for a more thorough cleanup to come back in. But I don't think that we're anywhere close to a trigger of it getting so messy that it needs an overhaul.
Right. So next steps, thank you, Zach. Next steps are
Just a
that-
sec, Shawnee's might have did you have a question? Okay. Okay,
that
sorry, go ahead.
again, the next board meeting, there will be a public hearing for public comment. There will be an advertisement in the local paper regarding the opportunity for a public hearing for our communities. And then also on the website, this map and presentation will be posted. After the public hearing at the next board meeting, then there'll be a resolution for approval. The deadline to do this is April 17th. Mid-April. So thank you.
Okay. Let me just make sure there aren't any public comments on this agenda item. I don't think there are. No.
Thank you.
So moving on to item 12.1, multi-tiered systems of support.
Hello, good evening. Again, Dr. Williams, President Dubois, and members of the board. It is a great honor that I am standing here tonight for the first time with Bonnie Hansen, Assistant Superintendent of Ed Services, hand in hand to talk about MTSS. As we know, MTSS is the umbrella that oversees all of our district. It is those tiers of support that we use for academics, tiers of support that we use for emotional health, tiers of support that we use for attendance, which I'll be talking about later tonight. And so it's been a long time coming where our two departments are standing side by side and saying, here's where we are with MTSS within the context of our departments. Mind you, the focus of my presentation tonight, for the most part, my slides will be about SEL and emotional health. And those of Bonnie's slides will be on academics. And so that's the way we parse this out. In the past, we've shown you what is MTSS, and you've gotten presentations with a lot of definitions on that and what that means in our district. And we've shown you what are our plans, and aspirationally, what would this look like? And so tonight, what we want to do is just show you what is in place. This is the dipstick. This is the snapshot in time. It's the inventory of what is happening at tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 when it comes to academics and when it comes to SEL, and then how we plan to or how we will continue to move forward. So with that.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Chacon. So what is our what, why, how? You give us our what, and that is a LCAP goal that then, well, first it was a governance goal that became an LCAP goal. And then the governance team in July did a little bit of updating of that goal. And the updating is in blue. So you can see that it's not yet part of the LCAP. And it's about our need to take care of the whole student, which certainly includes the work we're doing in MTSS. The why is because when we look at much of our data, when we look at surveys, it's evident that we have got students who need support. And then how, and Dr. Chacon already talked about it. What you're seeing tonight is here are the tier 1, 2, and 3 supports that we currently have district-wide for all of our students. After this, we will be identifying where are our gaps in our intervention support and working with stakeholders for the best means for filling those gaps. And when that is done, we'll be giving the concretized components of MTSS to all stakeholders so that they can see, here's what students get at each level. Here's when we assess what they need, whether it needs to go to the next level. And here's how you help students to access these resources. So again, tonight is just, here's what is already in place district-wide in tier 1.
So our definition is for tier 1 is that all students are taught using high quality first instruction, and support is provided for all students in the general education setting. Again, tonight we're highlighting the all means all. This is happening. Every program that we highlight in tier 1 is happening across our campuses academically and for SEL.
So the next thing I want to say is that I feel very, very fortunate to be working with Dr. Chacon. And I also feel very, very fortunate that I have my job and not hers, because academic supports is something that we have been doing in education almost since education became something that we do. Whereas MTSS is much, much newer in its focus in our school system. So while I am sharing with you supports that are in place for academics, many of these supports have been in place for a long time, whereas Dr. Chacon and her team are largely starting from scratch. So what you have here is a list of tier 1 interventions. It's what all students in our district get to help them on their way in their academic and college career pursuits. And you've had presentations on everything on this list. And there's one slide here that is not updated. The last bullet, the Newcomer ELD Welcome Center, that is actually a tier 2 support because not all of our students are newcomers.
So here, although we are a bit new to the SEL game as educators and an education community, we have put a lot in place for tier 1, including what we've presented before about our mental health counseling providers, the teen resource centers that are at each site. They're all called something different, but each site has one. Our wellness clubs that are student-led and the mental health support that all of our counselors offer. If you look at the column on the right, you'll notice that the main topic is that this is about skills related to self-awareness, self-management, positive interpersonal relations, empathy, responsible decision-making, goal setting. What I can say about that is you will see a list of programs beneath that. That list of programs that's the name of specific programs that happen at different sites. But generally, they all feed into teaching those same skills. So what I'm saying in that column is that those skills are universal. Those skills are taught across sites. but that is done through different programs depending on the site. So some sites have SOS, which is students offering support. Some sites do it through healthy relationships workshops. Some sites do it, through mindfulness activities, et cetera. But they all do address that issue universally and teach those skills universally. So to define tier two intervention is provided in addition to tier one. It's designed just for selected students who demonstrate a need for more targeted levels of support in any area, academically or emotionally. This level of support includes students identified as gifted in high achievement programs, and it may be provided within the classroom or even outside of the classroom as a referral.
And here you see the list of our tier 2 interventions. This breaks down, for instance, when a student comes to us and they have not been redesignated as fully English proficient. We're looking at what kinds of supports they might need. If they come with a low Lexile reading level, if they're a student who shows a great deal of promise, who's a first generation student, college candidate. So these go for not all students, but for students as we see them who need extra supports to meet their full potential academically and in their college career pursuits.
So again, this is where you will see, and appropriately so, the list starts to get smaller. And while we're always looking for more partnerships, ways to make this more universal across the district, and additional ways to support it tier 2 and tier 3, tier 2 supports tend to be less than tier 1. We have the most tier 1 supports because that serves every student, probably 80%. Then when you get up into tier 2, we're talking about 15% of the student population that need tier 2 supports. And so it is things like referrals to the campus support centers, teachers modifying practices to meet student needs. Sometimes that's through a 504 plan, progress monitoring with students that may have gone through an SST process. And you'll notice I did put on there SART on the bottom because I have exciting news about our SART and SARB process in another presentation. And I just wanted to whet your appetites for that. So that is one of our tier 2 supports, and we'll talk more about that later.
And then when we get to tier 3, this is our intensive support for a few students. And here's where you see them in the academic and college and career instruction realm. And please note that as Dr. Chacon shared earlier, this is also students who are identifying for things like GATE and for middle college. So it's students who are not served completely in our tier 1 and tier 2 interventions, and they need more to help them to be all that they can in our schools academically and social emotionally. So here's the list for academics and college career.
And here is the list for our social emotional. You can see that some of that may even lead to, special education assessment referral. A student may be having IEPs to support them as a behavior intervention. And again, it probably serves about 5% of the kids would be considered a tier 3. So school engagement support services that involve collaboration with school personnel and whole teams. I think I saw care teams, Shanice mentioned in one of her communications with me, is something that it's just those wraparound services, those few students who need a lot extra in order to keep them engaged in school, keep them emotionally healthy, and keep them attending school. And so I once again added SARB into this part of the SEL plan, which we will discuss more later.
And then finally, what you have before you is a next step, and that's the stakeholder input. So we, along with our teams, put together the list that we showed you tonight of our tier 1 and tier 2 and tier 3 current interventions. Now we need to take that list to our stakeholders and have them say, what is missing? So most of these are stakeholders within our district, but we also have the county for giving us guidance as far as what are other districts doing and what are holes that we within our community may not see that they can identify for us. So I will challenge the board that I think a squishy, that's an academic term, a squishy charge that you have is what is the role of the district and what is not the role of the district when it comes to students and our interventions. So I think we can unquestionably agree that the job of the district and our charge is for students to be healthy enough that they can find success with us academically and graduate with as many career and life opportunities as possible. Obviously, students have many, many more needs after they get to that point. How much of that is ours to do? How much are we qualified to do it? And how much can we afford to do it? And I'm so glad I don't have to be the one to answer that question. Now we welcome yours.
I'll start with the question. I usually go last. And sorry, I didn't ask this in advance. I thought of it as you were presenting. So I guess two questions. The first thing, we know that some kids need more support coming in, right? So let's use foster youth or homeless youth. And in the past, it seems like we had the academic piece. Like I know with foster youth, we gave them tutors, but we didn't have that social emotional piece. And I want to say that some foster youth may not want us getting near their social emotional lives, but others really need it, right? So how are we proactive with those types of students? And what is that going to look like? Because it really should, I love that you guys are presenting together. Finally, academic and social emotional together, right? So that's what it takes for kids to be successful. So let's take a foster youth, right? And maybe we have some indication that they've had trouble in school. I can't tell from the slides still. What do we do on that social emotional side for kids that they have to be receptive to the help, right? Or even like, how do we approach kids like that?
Right.
So that they'll take this extra stuff that we will offer. What are we doing?
So what I'll do is I'll go back to tier one, because what we know we do for all of our students is we are observing them in the classroom. We're trying to have engaging academic curriculum, a teen resource center, a place for them to go. We have our school counselors, our mental health counselors, those are available to all students. So essentially it comes down to we're teachers and staff noticing students, seeing that they might have a need beyond the classroom. At that point, usually if a student hasn't communicated himself, a staff member who's noticed this can communicate that need to a counselor or to one of our school behavior specialists, one of our school psychologists, who can then work with the student to pinpoint how they might best be served. There's no one path to say, oh, well, if you're foster youth, you're going to go down this path of intervention supports, because every student's need is different. The key is that if you're any student in need, we have teams in our tier one that are going to recognize this and perhaps recommend you to a tier three and a tier two, or maybe even a tier three support that does meet your needs. And so when we look at the listed tier one or the listed tier two or the listed tier three supports, students can access those. It just is depending on the referrals. And so one of the things our team is looking into, which I think is the most important, is what does that referral process look like? And so right now, that's the gap analysis we're doing. So Shannon, Evan, and Shayna are going site by site by site. And I think we mentioned this during the last presentation, and determining what the referral process is like, so that if somebody is noticing a student in need for any reason, any subgroup, any student, they know who to ask, who to go to, and that the process is clear. And that's part of what we want to align across systems. And we're hoping to have that done by working with these stakeholders.
Okay, great. Thanks for that. And then last question, Aspiration Advocates, and we have an Aspiration Advocate person here tonight in the audience. It's really been tweaked over time, right? And that's such fabulous wraparound support, again, for kids coming in, right? So that's going to continue. That's a big part of this, of one of our solutions, right?
Yes, I would say it's a tier three support for students who have not experienced success in their middle schools. And it goes down to what Dr. Chacon is saying about the percentile of the students who are in that. Maybe you could call it a tier two. I'll leave that up to Jenna. But yeah, it's been a really important support for many of our students who have traditionally not experienced success in our schools.
Yeah. Just having that targeted eye. Thank you, Jenna, for all you do for our kids. That constant eye and checking and home visits and everything else. So appreciate what they do. Thank you. Other questions, Chris? Pardon me? Do it now?
I don't know.
I'm gonna let the board talk first, and I do different things for different. Chris.
We're finding out, which is just fine. When I see a presentation with this many bullet points and rich options that the district is offering, it reminds me of a quote that very smart, like you guys, former member of our cabinet and former principal, who you will, I'm looking at you because he was at Woodside, said that government agencies frequently solve problems by the accretion of programs. And to me, that begs two questions that I guess I'd put to you. The first, I'm not as serious about, but it's the process. Do we have a review process that's measuring some programs that we might want to discontinue? I think that's important, but maybe not a great question, not as big a question as the other one I have is, to what extent do we have systemic responses to these things? I think I could see it in some ways. I think of teacher training is a form of systemic response and can have bigger ongoing impact.
Yes, dear David Riley will forever be missed. His son is a senior. I know. An example of looking at a system that we have in place that is an intervention and deciding is how it's going is something you're going to get a board report on in the fall. Like we did with our math intervention, right now we're doing an in-depth study of what is happening with our students who go through our English support programs, and are we getting the outcomes with those students that we wish to get out. So I would say with big things that have been around for a long time, it happens. But is there a systematic, which programs are we looking at this year? At least in my department, no, there isn't. Yeah, I would say systemic. Yes.
We do, and I can follow up with what Ms. Hansen said about that, just in the sense of, it is times that we bring presentations forward, like when I talk specifically about MTSS for mental health, and I'm just talking about those programs. That is because we've looked at those programs, vetted through those programs, talked about those programs, and what is the next iteration. Tonight, we're talking about SART and SARB, and it's because we've re-looked at that program, vetted that program, cut pieces of it, added new pieces of it, and now want to represent it. And so through the board presentations, that is us presenting on MTSS programs, because MTSS is all encompassing. And I believe you had a second question that I thought I had an answer to, but
one was, what are we doing systemically?
Mhm.
The other was, what do we do to weed programs that are about?
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Alan, do you have a question?
Just a quick one. Nobody has complimented you yet on the presentation, but the tag team effort was brilliant, and it is exciting to see that the two disciplines are working so effectively together for greater service to our students. And what we're beginning to see is a more coherent presentation of the range of things that we have. I like the recognition that we are after the same goals everywhere, but we're doing them in different homegrown ways that reflect the individual communities. And I think the gap filling is going to represent an awful lot of sharing of best practices and professionals, mutual support across sites, which is something we always want to encourage very much.
Denise?
Thank you all for the presentation, first of all. Give honor where honor is due. There are a couple questions, and I'm not for sure if Bonnie or Dr. Chacon will be able to answer this. I'm not for sure where it lies, but there's something on here about student resource centers. What are those? Because I don't think there's one at MA, so I'm wondering what you're referring to.
there is, and they call it the Zenden. So at MA, the example would be the Zenden. At Sequoia, it's called the Teen Resource Center. Every site has one like that. They're all named differently. It would be another example, like you see in that right column, of one of a center that serves the same need, just called different things and run a little differently at each site, but meets those needs.
Okay. That was one question I had. And then, and I don't know where this lie, Bonnie, the skills that you're talking about in that the second column with all the separate bullets, is that curriculum? Is that,
So
what
this
is
slide,
that?
this slide is the social emotional slide.
Uh-huh.
So this would be,
Sorry, that's the slide I'm on.
yeah, that's the one
Okay.
you're on, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So which one are you looking at?
What are all the clear bullets? What are those curriculum? Is that approach? Is that?
Oh, it's in a variety of ways. We have some partners will come in and run workshops. Some are run by counselors. Some are in the, freshman core class that teaches those skills. They come in a variety of ways. The site, again, with the point that every one of our students gets class or workshop around skills related to the list above: self-awareness, self-management, et cetera.
Okay, thank you. I think just my basic comment is one, I thank you for organizing things, because I think that helps with trying to figure out like tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 without the upside down things and stuff like that. So this helps me to kind of think linearly. So I appreciate that. I'm sure the other stuff will come, and I appreciate that too, but this kind of feeds my mind a little bit different. But I do wanted to talk about social emotional learning. And I know outside people come in and out, but how is it integrated actually in the classroom? Because we know that you can still be talking about math 15 minutes in, but there's something social emotional, or maybe there's an advisory. And I know at MA we do flex time, and other sites may. So how is it actually integrated in? Because not all student is connected to a Jenna. Not all students are connected to an AVID or special ed program, but they still need to be seen.
Right. So some of it is baked into the curriculum. So for instance, the neuroscience of addiction, that's something that all freshmen get in their life skills class. But I think there are some softer skills that you're talking about that come with teacher training, and we're looking at doing some of that next year.
Okay. So that would be some of the trauma informed, which is how we respond to students who are maybe yelling, or maybe they're not in their best place, or they're just not feeling like it. Instead of drilling down on the academics, we say, hey, what's happening? What's going on? Okay. So that will be, I know you can't do everything in 1 year, so that will come hopefully next year.
Yes, that would be, we didn't have that in the inventory because it's in our aspirational of next year. We plan to do de-escalation and trauma-informed care, professional development for staff.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to go to public comment, and then I'll come back to the board. First person is Rachel Andrus.
Hello, good evening. I'm Rachel Andrews, and I am the AVID District Director. Hello, everybody. I had some questions about our next steps for input. Thank you very much for having AVID represented in our Tier 2 supports. I'm looking at the stakeholder input slide, and I'm not seeing a particular opportunity for our AVID teachers, the people sort of delivering the support, to give input. I'm also noticing that I don't see our academy programs represented in this presentation, or a particular place for their input to be included. And so I am wondering about where that next level of input will be to kind of fill in those gaps and make sure that the staff at the sites most involved with the students and delivering the supports, when that opportunity will be.
I'm kind of interested. Are you guys okay with? Yes.
I think that as we start vetting this, we're going to get comments like the one we just had, and my heartfelt apologies that I did not include the academies as a Tier 2 intervention, because they most certainly are. So Rachel, I just noted that we need to talk to you guys.
Thank you. Next speaker, Abby Corman.
Thank you. I'm so glad to have this presentation on MTSS. It's so necessary for us as a district to be delivering both academic and behavioral and social emotional support to our students at whatever tier they come to. I heard Bonnie name that there'll be more presented later as to how people can get involved and that it'll be presented to stakeholders. So maybe this first question's better suited to a later conversation. It's going to echo maybe align a little bit with what Rachel shared. As just a teacher at MA, I'm curious and unclear about how my students can have access to some of the tier 1 resources named, such as restorative practices and lessons on skills related to self-awareness, self-management, etc. And then I'm also wondering where our SUHSD students fall into these tiers. How many students at each school do we identify in each tier? Do we have more tier 2 and 3 needs after the pandemic? Have we been able to increase the number of those services or the timeliness of those services? Or are the same structures now serving more students? I'd very much like to dive deeper into this conversation with tier 2 and tier 3 students, mostly on my caseload, with staff at the district. And I look forward to ways in which teachers like myself and others and students can provide feedback, input, and questions through stakeholder input. Looking forward to hearing about that and wondering when we hope that might be. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Go back to the board. Any other comments? Nope. Thank you very much. Okay. All right, on to our next item, 12.2. So this is attendance and student attendance review board, or a SARB, S-A-R-B, something that I've been talking about for a while, I think. Somebody told me once I would not have, before I ran for school board, that I might not have the patience for policy making because it's so slow. So I need to tell other people that if they want to run for school board.
And here we are.
Is that a good way to introduce it?
So good evening, Dr. Williams, President Dubois, and members of the board. I am here today presenting with my esteemed colleague, Jared Dooley, on attendance and us wanting to restart and improve and move forward with our SART and SARB process. And we're actually very excited about it. Just a little personal history. I know Jarrett came from a district that had really strong SART and SARB, as did I. And so when we sit down and talk, we get pretty excited about this topic as well. So we are glad to be able to do this because of the district's commitment to the education of all students. We know that the regular attendance plays regular attendance plays an important role in student achievement, and that absenteeism, whatever the cause, can put students at risk of dropping out of school. And obviously that's not something we want to see. So just a little bit of data before we jump into it, so you know the why. Why would we be looking into this? This is our current by school as of March 7th, 2022, everywhere from students with excellent attendance in red, satisfactory attendance, manageable, meaning they're not yet chronic, chronic and severe. And what we mean by chronic and severe chronic attendance, chronic would be anything from 10 to 19% of school days missed. So if you were at the low end of that, 10% of school days missed, you're already missing 18 school days in a year. So that's what that purple band represents. Severe chronic would be anyone who is missing 20% or more of a school year, which would be 36 days of a school year or more. And so this is a representation site by site of where students fall in that attendance data. So you can see just from the yellow, looking at severe chronic, those are students 20% absenteeism or more, and the purple band is students who are 10% absenteeism, 10 to 19%. So while we do have a lot of great attendance, we do clearly have some areas of improvement, and we want to reach those students. We want to get them in school. We want to give them their academics and the emotional supports that they need. which is the point of SART and SARB. So as I mentioned earlier, and I'll be brief because here we are, Shanice, with the pyramid. I apologize. Some people like this graphic. but what it is showing is that MTSS, this is the whole graphic for MTSS, covers many things. And tonight I covered SEL. Bonnie covered this column over here that says academic support. And what Jarrett and I are about to talk about is the tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 of attendance. That's the one that's right in the middle there, because we know that in order to access any of this, students need to be in attendance. So again, it is a part of MTSS, and we always want to couch it in that. So the tier 1 is essentially to serve students that are already engaging in school or missing 5 to 9% of the school year. And the way we can serve most students is by making sure we have engaging curriculum, activities, sports, recognizing good attendance, identifying common barriers, and referring students for other supports that they might need, or having them with an adult connection, someone that they want to come to campus that they're connected with so that they're not missing school. Tier 2, again, it's for those students who have chronic absenteeism, 10 to 19%. That's when we need to personalize early outreach, have SART meetings, team meetings with them, and show that there are mentors that care, that there's programs they can work with. And tier 3, again, it's for those severely chronic students who are out 20% or more of the school year. And that's the students that we really want to use our SARB process for, because what SARB does is create opportunities for students to make connections. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. So the presentation this evening, we're going to re-go over those definitions, talk a little bit about the background, pre-pandemic, pandemic, and now. And then what we're going to be doing this spring and starting up in the fall to restart our SART and SARB for support of students. So with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Dooley.
Thank you, Dr. Chacon. To start, well, in the middle of the presentation, good idea to review language, providing some definitions for common understanding. Per California Education Code related to attendance, we can see a few of those here as Dr. Chacon started to elaborate on. Starting with chronic absenteeism, students with absences for any reason that total more than 10% of the school days. That includes excused absences. So all absences in total go into chronic absenteeism. A student identified as truant is one that has 3 full days of absences or tardies greater than 30 minutes 3 times without a valid excuse. Excuse me. A habitually truant student is one that has 3 or more occurrences of truancy identification. And note that our schools and as a district, we're required to conference with parents after a first or second occurrence prior to identifying that student as chronically truant. These are students that have gone through the truancy interventions but have unexcused absences greater than 10% of school days. Note that California Department of Education now uses chronic absenteeism for the dashboard indicator. In the past, that focus had been on chronic truancy. This means the state is focusing on all absences, not just unexcused absences as they have in the past. It's pertinent to point out that in 2019, pre-pandemic planning occurred in order to implement district attendance supports. This began with engaging stakeholders, which included superintendent and cabinet, school administrators, attendance clerks, and information services staff, to name a few, in order to plan for and implement an attendance monitoring system. This system was then included in the LCAP from the same year, with the board subsequently approving the contract for attention to attendance. Our department went into training and professional development mode with our stakeholders, leading to the draft of the district's attendance handbook and the attendance review process. The 19 to 20 school year saw our first implementation of Tier 2 attendance interventions district-wide, which included traditional truancy and excessive excused absence letters and group attendance conferences with the students and parents identified. Then the pandemic struck. Time, effort, and energy was diverted to keeping students engaged and connected to their new digital classrooms, as seen in the district's student attendance and engagement plan. This effort engulfed most of our staff at the time, from teachers to classified support to administrators and others. As we transition to full-time in-person learning this school year, the same time, effort, and energy continue to be applied to student engagement and supporting positive attendance. This resulted in modified letters that no longer spoke about truancy and negative attendance, rather on the communication of absences and resources to help families during the pandemic. As just noted, this is a draft of the district's attendance review process, which is a visual representation discussing the specific thresholds by periods of absence that result in each communication component. This follows the tiered approach to intervention, as we heard about in the MTSS presentation and as Dr. Chacon alluded to tonight. As we continue this spring, we will engage further trainings to restart and refocus Tier 2 prevention and early intervention by again modifying our communication letters to parents and guardians. For students in Tier 3 facing those greatest challenges, we will offer more intensive Tier 3 interventions via the District Student Attendance Review Board, otherwise known as SARB, starting the next school year. The SARB process is not an intervention in its own right, rather simply the mechanism for activating those Tier 3 interventions. Similar to how the district shifted in response to student discipline, the approach to addressing absenteeism has changed. These meetings will no longer be punitive in nature, as has been historically the practice, without hostility pitting families against the school district. The design of the district SARB is one that is restorative and collaborative. The goal is coming together as a group to identify and provide interventions that directly tie into students' needs. As a group, the SARB can be made up of a number of individuals as outlined here, which is not an inclusive list, by the way. It is important to note that each SARB will be created with individuals that can provide resources, supports, and interventions based upon identified student need. This can include district staff, health and wellness and community partners, social services agencies, community members and partners, just to name a few. Additionally, we are in the process of certifying a school psychologist in the Student Services Department to become a trainer in the International Institute of Restorative Practice. This will help ensure proper training is provided to our SARB members in order to approach the process restoratively. Now let's take a look at what the SARB process will become at the Tier 3 level. Step 1 is all about our site-based interventions. Schools will review students' cumulative files and student records. They'll also do a comprehensive review of all attempted interventions prior to referring any student to the district SARB. Some of these interventions may include calls to home, counselor and parent conferences, meeting with administrators, pre-SSTs, SSTs, student attendance review team at the school site, Section 504 plan, mental health referrals, possible assessment for special education, home visits, welfare checks, CPS reports, just to name some. The school will then submit this information to the Student Services Department via a detailed SARB packet. Step 2, this is where the district begins preparing the case. At this point, our welfare and attendance coordinator will carefully review and engage in a question and answering session with the school if needed and determine the following. 1, potential SARB members. Again, every effort will be made to match resources with student need and the determination of necessary panel members. And 2, the coordinator will facilitate a pre-SARB conference with student and parent to discuss process, collaborativeness, a restorative focus, and expectations of the upcoming SARB meeting. In step 3, this is the district SARB meeting. Our SARB panel will engage with the referring school and referring families to ask the what, why, and how. What is preventing the student from attending school? Why is the student not attending school? And how can the panel intervene to provide re-engagement opportunities to the student? At the end of the meeting, with the collaboration of site staff, students, and parents, a re-engagement and improvement plan will be created to help support the student in positively increasing attendance. The agreement may include, just to name a few options, Some of the interventions previously provided and offered to the school, yet again, an assessment for special education services if applicable, referrals to school, district, or community-based organizations, alternative placement to another educational program, and other specific interventions that would support the student and family that the district has access to. It is important to note here that students and parents have a strong voice in the development of the plan, as it will obviously be less difficult for them to buy in to a plan that they agree with. Each SARB is designed to last approximately 30 to 45 minutes. In step 4, site administration or designee, along with the welfare and attendance coordinator, will monitor the SARB improvement plan with periodic updates to the district's SARB members for that specific student. This may result in modifications as necessary. And lastly, a referral to the county SARB may be required, which closely would resemble our district SARB process, with the exception of having access to additional countywide interventions and supports. Thank you. That concludes our presentation.
Thank you. Our superintendent is clapping. I do have a public comment card from Edith. And I also have a comment from a Zoom comment, which I'll call in next.
Yes, I looked through the presentation. I was very impressed by the presentation, but I did notice that, at least as I understood it, all of the definitions refer to full day absences. And I know the board has discussed often, and teachers are very concerned with, what about that student who attends Spanish class, obviously coolest class that offered, but then fail to appear for their other 5 classes? Do they miss out on this intervention because they are not absent for the full day? Or for the student who, for whatever reason, attends 5 classes, but regularly forgets to attend Spanish class? How is this intervention triggered for those kinds of situations? Thank you. Oh, sorry, the other concern was, if we discuss period attendance, because our schools all have interesting mixes of short and block periods, how we determine what constitutes a missing a day or a class. Because at Sequoia, for example, my 4th period class meets Tuesday, Wednesday, Friday for 100 minutes on Tuesday, for 40 minutes on Wednesday, for 85 minutes on Friday. So a student could miss 6 classes, but based on the day they were absent, could miss anywhere from 4 to 10 hours of class. So that's something that I hope will be addressed as well. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And you took my question. Now for the Zoom audience, Abby Corman.
Hello again. I'm so glad to have this report. As I know, Trustee Dubois and Stevenson have been asking, and it's been on the minds of many teachers with student names on their roster who've not been showing up, especially after our pandemic. Looking at the MTSS tiers of intervention, I'm thrilled to see that in Tier 2, students receive personalized early outreach, an action plan addressing barriers, and caring mentors. Is this part of the upcoming work? I'm also wondering who at the site is responsible for this attendance monitoring and intervention. And since we're not mailing home grades, will these letters sent home be our only mailed correspondence? And if so, I'm nervous about the number of inaccurate addresses we have in Internet Campus and our inability to get them bounced back, since we no longer send home grades 8 times a year. So a couple of questions. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And so it's my understanding that staff gets back to.
Yes, we will get back. There will be a policy bulletin that is going to come before the board, and then it will be sent out. And just to note, we will start to send out report cards again. And so more information is coming regarding that. Just wanted to add that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now for board member questions. Shanice?
Thank you all so much. Trustee Dubois had on her mask, but I could tell with her eyes, she was just giddy over this information. So I'm happy it came. I do have a few questions regarding it. One of the things, I'm not for sure if Ravenswood did this, but when I was at Ravenswood, back in the day when we had family resource centers at some of the schools, we did have kind of like a multidisciplinary team approach to students that rose to the top who had discipline issues or other positive behavior supports or SST, all those kinds of things where RIS had rose to basically an administrative level. And one of the things that was really helpful is to have more of someone like a community-based organization that kind of has a different approach with kids than more of a formal approach of the district. Are you thinking that will be part of this process? When I was looking at that list, I'm thinking like CPS and public health and all this stuff, and it gets very administrative and not necessarily student-oriented, trauma-informed oriented, family-centered approach. And so, and I'm trying to think about how that would make, say, for instance, a family who doesn't speak English or English is not their first language, or a student who's had difficulties with different systems, accepting and being open to them entering in and out of those systems. So just kind of wondering about that.
Yeah, it's a good question. And we did intentionally have social service partners on our list for that very reason. I know in my previous district, we worked with an organization called Keeping Kids in School that did just that. It was essentially the small amount of tier 3 students that needed a little more support, and they would do things like go to the home, check backpacks, walk the students to school, etc. The tricky thing here, it's also a blessing here, is that because the community is so large and everyone has its pocket, sometimes these social organizations will serve a certain part of the district and not another part of the district. So I think the answer, the long and the short, is yes, we will involve community organizations. We may end up needing to involve more than one community organization depending on the jurisdiction or which communities that the organizations serve.
I think the great thing about San Mateo County is part of our DNA to collaborate, and actually it's frowned upon if you don't. So I know people will be at the table to be able to collaborate. I am a little concerned about it being a little bit too administrative. And even though your intention is not punitive, the person who's receiving that may feel like it's punitive. And so keeping that in mind. The other thing is the letters. So I have an experience with letters because I had a kid who didn't always go to class. I'm like, how did you forget to go to math again? But that all worked out. But I remember getting these letters and it felt very governmental. It's the best way. And having to call in and get things rectified because they were taken out for different reasons related to their needs. And so these letters are actually don't reflect this process the way that it's received. And so I'm wondering just around how we're going to innovate to kind of have a process that says trauma informed, but yet set the boundaries, right? So that families feel like this is a supportive process, not a police process or a truancy process, something less governmental and less formal. Feeling so that I will engage in the process.
Yes, I remember that day that we had a conversation about that letter. What I'll say in response to that is, in a short amount of time, we've come a long way with our notifications for, as required by California Education Code, first, second, and third notification of truancy per the 3 definitions that we did discuss. Unfortunately, that same provision of Education Code also outlines very specific requirements we must that we are mandated to include in our first letter. And I tell you what, there is no way around making that less governmental-ish. I just made that word up. But what I will say is, as kind of outlined in the presentation, especially the shift during the pandemic and the re-engagement and the connectedness for our students during their distance learning, we took a hard left, even like a U-turn. And so as we continue to modify and rephrase our communications in writing that do go out in students' home languages, hard copy in the mail, that's the promise, is we will continue to modify it to serve in a better way, so that we're coming together in support of the students' attendance, and it's not seen as punitive, and it's not just immediately the reaction to that letter is negative. That's what we're going to be trying to change. I know we've started that, but a lot more to come.
And then my last question is about bias. We know that the number of children and individuals who get referred for systems like this, of course, they need support, but they also may sometimes just don't fit our school system or a traditional way of doing things. And so they're disciplined, they're referred more. So how are you going to safeguard this process so that certain students are not targeted more than others, especially coming from the sites? Not saying the sites are doing something wrong, but we're human. And so bias jumps in there, whether we think we've done all our work or not. Bias show up. And so I'm just wondering what the safeguards will be.
Fortunately, with attendance, this is one area where we get that safeguard just because we're relying on data. When we showed those definitions, it really is about number of absences that a student has had. And we also have the system, the attention to attendance system that tracks that, so that we can say, oh, this student needs our help with attendance. It's less about, it's not about discipline. It's not about a referral. It's about, this student has not been coming to school. This is the number, this is the fact of their attendance, and we need to do whatever we can to support them. And so what makes it unbiased is just the data is a number around how much they have or have not been attending school in this case.
Ellen?
So one of the things that's been interesting to me listening to all of this and thinking about it is going to be our pathway going forward for really tracking progress and effectiveness, because we're coming from not only a time where we didn't have great baselines. It was somewhat a lack of real deep focus and attention on attendance that brought us to the point of finally taking this action, but then also the huge disruption of the pandemic, which has completely transformed the perspective of what attendance means and how it's enforced and just the way the whole thing's handled. So as we again move forward to the new normal, and our new normal includes a SARB and a whole lot of new processing, it's going to be challenging and interesting to kind of track and connect to our baselines and understand what the baselines are and what they mean, because we want to see clear improvements from pre-pandemic times when some of our measurement was a bit muddy, and clear improvement from pandemic times where everything was very disrupted, and then clear progress over time within the new normal that we create. Have you had some thoughts on any of that?
I agree with you with what you're saying, Trustee Sarver, because that was the goal when we started in 2019, a new baseline of data. And actually that same year was when the state pivoted to chronic absenteeism. And I know Bonnie and Ed Services talking about the dashboard and the indicator for that, supporting the shift in that direction. And then obviously the pandemic, and then now the state still hasn't reported on that indicator yet because baseline data still has yet to be established because of the change from only unexcused absences is the focus to now all absences. So the thought is we have to be starting the work at the time where we are creating the baseline, so the baseline is as accurate as possible. And that is going to be moving into next school year, because I think this school year, obviously, we still have some anomalies in our attendance data, as we are well aware, just simply based on the year being our first full year of full-time in-person instruction. So certainly more to come.
I'll just say I really appreciate the data slide. It answered the why and explained the solution. So thank you for that one and for the whole presentation, but appreciate that data slide.
Yep. I also want to say thank you. Really, really exciting work. The only question I have in talking to teachers and community members who know about some of the kids that are not attending, it's because they have to work, right? And kids are not supposed to be working full time, right? They're supposed to be in school. But the reality of this community, when housing prices are so ridiculous, the kids literally have to work to survive, right? And some of our kids are also kind of homeless and on their own, right? And they have to work. So I know some districts have done, so like a SARB's not going to solve that problem. So some districts have done Saturday schools, evening schools, figured out some flexible options for kids like that, because I mean, that's my dream, right? I mean, I remember one time somebody said, you can't design an individual educational system for every kid, but if we're about equity and if we're about the most vulnerable, if we really care about every kid, we have to. So is that at all in the conversation? Because it's not, I want to SARB so badly for the families that need that extra support, but for the kids that are working, the SARB is not going to solve it. And I would just wonder how many of those kids are in that situation.
Yeah, and what I could say to that is, students in that situation who aren't attending at all would be brought forth to a SARB. And the idea of a SARB panel is to come up with creative solutions for engaging the student in their academics. And so that would, again, that's when you're really looking at a few students on a case by case. What can we as a community do to create it, to get this student to the finish line for school? And so that would be something that could be discussed, and we brainstorm as a panel to come up with creative solutions to help students.
That coupled with a SARB would be just a dream solution, I think, part of the problem. The other thing I wanted to comment on, the Redwood absentee rate, we really have to compare that school to other continuation schools, right? I mean, because they have a lot of absences. I know that, the school has really turned around. I mean, there were a time where there were very few kids attending. And when I go onto that campus now, it's full. The classrooms seem full. But when you look at the data, for somebody who doesn't understand continuation schools, right? So I think they're actually doing really well. And yeah, so I don't know, when it's compared to the comprehensives, a lot of people might not understand that. So I don't know how to frame that for our community so they understand. And again, at that school, a lot of the students have to work, right?
So what if I may?
Yes.
So I appreciate the presentation, and then also just to note that we were taking it one step at a time. We are starting the SARB and the SART, and we are very happy that we are restarting it in the district. And so a lot of the responses to these queries, which are great, are going to develop over time as we collaborate. And part of the process from the MTSS and the purpose of the presentations are to provide information, but also to explain the space that's being created for us to have increased collaboration with our principals, with our teachers who are with the students every day, and also input from our actual students and student representatives. And so there is more to come. And at this point, we may not have all of the answers, but do know Saturday school Um, uh, we've talked about Saturday school and additional opportunities and summer school, but we're also very mindful that we're not creating, given this context where we are we're still in the pandemic, people are still at different levels of anxiety and exhaustion, that we are not adding to that. So it's pushing us to become more creative and innovative in terms of our offerings. And those are the conversations that we're having. So if we don't have exact answers right now, I do want you to know that it is at our forefront, but we want to be very diligent. We want to be inclusive, and we also want to be respectful of every student and where they are as we put together these plans for the district.
Thank you for that. All right. Thank you for the presentation. Good work. All right. Item 14.2, second interim report.
Good evening, everyone, again. Little lonely up here. Everyone's always had a partner tonight. By myself. All right, so good evening, everyone. Tonight I'm here to present to you the second interim fiscal report that takes in actuals from July 1 through January 31st. The last time I was up here, I was presenting first interim, which takes into actuals July 1 through October 31st. So you can see that we do have a couple more months in actuals in this financial report, which also allows us to adjust our projections for the remaining of this year and then in the out years. So very similar timeline that I have brought to you before. It's very important to know that the business office are working in multiple years when we are talking about finances. So right now we are in March. It's like the one time of the year that's just focused on one, Dina would probably argue with this, one budget as she's getting ready to gear up for adopted budget for the next year. And it really just gains speed after this. So for June, we'll bring you adopted budget, estimated actuals, and then unaudited actuals in September. So there are 3 certifications possible for interim reports. A positive certification that indicates that the district will be able to meet its financial obligations for the remainder of this fiscal and the 2 out years. Qualified is that the district will be able to meet its financial obligation for current and possibly the 2 subsequent. And negative indicates that the district will not be able to meet its financial obligations for the current year or the 2 subsequent years. So I am pleased to report, probably at no surprise, that I present to you a positive certification for approval tonight with our second interim report. So let's go ahead and get started. So as we know that the majority of our revenue is based from our property tax. It's primarily from that secured roll. We do see, as reported in first interim, that decrease in that 2021 audited actuals year, and that was for that restatement from that Chula Vista case. I believe that's noted here as we talked about before. So for the out years, when I have been presenting, we talk about what do we project for out years. We project a 5%. And again, that is only on the secured roll. So when we percentage all these out, you can see that we actually fall slightly below 5% in the projections. But again, we are secure with our 5% projection rate. And in previous years, although it has slowed down, we are still exceeding the 6%. So at budget adoption, we projected the 5%, as I noted, but we had a slight increase of 0.36, which reflects a total projected increase of about 536 as of right now. That will also update in June. So again, you can see in June, there's like nothing we're really presenting in June because budget is technically done in May. And so that adjustment happens during year-end close, and then you start to see that in unaudited actuals. And so for a basic aid district or a community funded district, those property taxes start to see that fluctuation throughout the financial cycle when we're talking about revenues. So let's talk about some revenues. So again, we anticipated an overall revenue increase of 1.8 million due to the reduction in charter and loop payments based on P1 data. So the P1 data, that's the ADA attendance data that the charter schools certify. That's how we fund the charter schools. So they are down enrollment, which means they are also down in attendance, which proves a savings to us from that around $13 million in loop payment that we pay our charter schools. Our federal revenue sources have a slight increase. We do report everything of only 4,000, updated basically to a restricted grant. Other state revenue sources do have a significant increase from what was reported to you at first interim of just under 2 million. And that's related to the educator effectiveness grant, which I believe Bonnie presented in December, January. So that's tied to that. So that's also going to show an increase in expenses as we start to plan the cost centers around that grant. Our local revenue sources, put this up a little bit more. Our local revenue sources, that's our leases and our rentals. There is an increase of about 1.1 from first interim, and that's site revenue, corporate donations, as you can see retrospectively, both together, about 467 and 494. We do have in projected contributions to our special education restricted programs. So the majority of that program is funded by the unrestricted general fund, known as contribution. The yucky but industry term is also encroachment, has just decreased by about $1 million. And that's as a result of a larger transfer from RDA revenue. So it kind of offsets. We got a little bit of boost in our special ed funding. So when we move on to expenditures, certificated salaries increased about 1.5 from first interim. This is temporary support positions funded by COVID and additional staffing to support growing satellite programs. Classified salaries increased just slightly over 1 million. Again, various clerical, administrative, and student support due to LCAP and COVID expenditure plans and expenditures actually being realized. We had a slight increase in employee benefits. Again, when you have a salary increase, you're also going to have a corresponding benefit increase. Our books and supplies, pretty consistent with first interim. Services and other operating expenses increased 3.2 million. This is more of a regulatory requirement. Some restricted programs require the program to be balanced. Sometimes there's not able to have an ending fund balance. And so you have to actually load the expenditures, and then at unaudited actuals and at year-end close, those are shifted and moved to the next year. So that's why you also see that larger increase in that services and other operating expenses. We did have some an increase of 1.9 in combination with increases to settlement of MPS tuition costs. And we had a slight increase in our insurance cost of 440 for contract services. So in capital outlay, we had an increase of 52,000. We needed to have some replacement of some heavy machinery for the warehouse and some new copy equipment. So when we talk about other funds, there are several other funds that sit outside of the general fund, which is Fund 01. To start off, Fund 08, this is a new fund. This is the Student Activity Special Reserve Fund. This fund was just established last year, and it only includes bank balances. So you're not going to see a lot of activity. This fund is heavily monitored by the auditors as well. We have Fund 09, that's our charter school, so East Palo Alto Academy. That is where their finances sit. Their finances do not sit in Fund 01. Expenditures are projected about 7.6 million. And they're covered by a combination of revenue and then general fund transfers from the general fund to support facility cost. Fund 11 is the adult ed fund. Revenues are projected at about 2.1 million, budget expenditures slightly over 2.3. Any excess or deficit spending will come from their ending fund balance. Fund 13 is our cafeteria fund. It's our food service. Revenues are projected at about 1.8 and expenditures at 3.1. So we see a huge deficit here. In a district like ours, where our salaries are very good, it's very unlikely that we will ever receive the actual revenue, whether that be from free sales or reimbursement from the state, to really balance this fund on its own. But there are always areas to improve. So there will be a contribution from the general fund of about 1.2 million. Fund 14 is deferred maintenance. It's that we have revenues are projected about 840,000. There's a slight contribution from the unrestricted general fund to support the deferred maintenance fund. And we have expenditures of slightly over $1 million. Although those numbers do not equal, there is an ending fund balance in that account. So this is based off of the types of repairs that we can do from a five-year deferred maintenance plan. Fund 21 is our building fund. That's where we put our bond money. The district anticipates that we're going to spend that remaining balance of $239,000 prior to June 22. So our projects are done. We have some closeout that we are doing, and then we are done with that bond. Fund 25 is capital facilities. Revenues projected about 1.8 and expenditures about 242. There is a significant reserve balance in here of about 6.76 million. Fund 35, see here, revenue is projected about 376, primarily from earned interest, expenditures about 1.4. So when you see the activity in Fund 25 and Fund 35, these funds start to really pick up in motion when there's no bond funds and there's still a need for capital facilities. So we'll start to see that as we plan different types of upgrades and why it's really important and to a point of being essential that the district is able to obtain another bond. Fund 40, revenue is projected about 302,000, again, from interest and rental income, expenditures about 424. This fund also has a reserve. Fund 71, this is our SERP account. It's more of a transfer account as far as Fund 71 and how the money goes in and out. But as of December 31st, the value of our SERP account was just under 10.1, which is very healthy considering when we started with the 7 million. So it's definitely going up. I think we had a moment or two where it went down when the market went down. Okay, here we go. Okay. So when we look at our multi-year projection, also known as the MYP, the total revenues for second interim are around 214 million, projected for the first out years at 196, and then we see that increase in 23-24. So you see the influx in revenue and you see the influx in expenditures, and that fluctuation is primarily due to COVID, right? So there's this There's all this COVID money coming in. There's regulatory requirements on when it can be posted, when it can be spent, and there's lots of unknown, but it really needs to be put on a line and not fall to that ending fund balance because there are several restrictions around it. So any money that is not spent or targeted to be spent in 21-22 at year end, if it's unrealized, then it will fall forward to the out years as far as COVID goes. So right now it's second interim. Again, those are actuals through January 31st. Our ending fund balance in percents of reserve, which is what we like to talk about, for current year is 8.74%. Next year, 5.13%, and then 3%. The one thing about this MYP, even though COVID makes it not as clean as I definitely would like it, the one thing that we do have, which is thanks to SDTA and thanks to AFSCME, is a multi-year agreement. So it really gives us an opportunity to kind of sit back and readjust and really work on our projections, because so often throughout the year, right, we are basing off of what is it going to look like when we settle negotiations. So this allows us a little bit of breather room to try some different budgeting techniques and styles when it comes to projections. So when we look at the first and second adopted budget, first and second interim, you can see that budget is fluid, right? So at adopted budget, our revenues were projected at 193. We ended up with 209 at first interim, and now we're at 214 at second interim. And then expenditures, we can also see that increase. Again, primarily due to COVID. Obviously, the big change from adopted budget to the interim reports is the settlement of salary negotiations. And so again, that's why it's so important to remember that budget is a snapshot. What we look at today, what Dina already put in here as actuals, you know, obviously has changed, but often immaterial. So as far as enrollment goes, we are fairly stable. I know that we've talked a lot during COVID, what that potentially will look like. Are we in declining enrollment? Right now, we look for next year around the same as where we are this year. I do think it's going to kind of be a wash. We still have that bubble coming up through Carlmont, but there are no direct increases. So obviously these are across all of our sites. They do not include our charters. So if you're looking on state information, you'll see much higher numbers because those include our charter schools. So what's next? Again, this is the season for governance goals for next year. LCAPs from Ms. Hanson in her area. And those are the main drivers for the budget. So when you see the budget come back to you in May and come back to you in June, it is based off of the district's goals, the district's initiatives, and where the LCAP sits. And so all those plans are incorporated into the regulatory document, which is the budget. And so the business office will continue to work on current and out year projections. We do have 10 years internally on the back end. We were able to get that this year. So thank you to Dina and her staff. Any questions?
Board member questions?
I'll comment that your finance subcommittee or committee, Rich and I had the chance to meet with Crystal last week. I guess it was in advance of this meeting, go over the second interim report. She was happy to openly addressed all of our questions, I believe. And with that in mind, I think we're going to recommend, I think it's an easy recommendation to give a positive certification. Anything to add, Rich?
Yes. Alan?
I guess it would just be remiss not to note the trend over the next 3 years down toward a 3% reserve. And I know there are, you know, a great number of reasons leading to that, and a great number of variables and potentials for addressing it as we move forward. But I mean, in general, what sorts of hopes do we have of doing better than that and not cutting it so close?
Well, and that's primarily due to how we project our property taxes, with that being our number one revenue source, and we do conservative at 5%. We're, obviously taking a lot of that revenue off the top that would then increase. And that's also going to, affect our deficit spending when we look at that. You always see that decline. For me, it's about tightening up our projections. We'll get a better picture of that at close this year. We always start budget adoption here, and then we climb at first, we climb at second, we climb at estimated actuals, and then we tend to tank. I just want to be able for us to look at why that happens. And so, is it within our control? What did we not realize? And I think that will help us address those numbers in those out years, because even though it is 2 years out, that number is very important, because there are a lot of factors that are outside of our control, even as a basic aid district.
Nothing? Nothing. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Pretty good. 9:45. I think we're done. We're not? No. We're not. Do you guys have another page that I don't have?
It sounded like a motion to me.
Oh. I guess I'm ready to go home. Sorry about that. Is there a motion?
We accept the recommendation for the second interim
Okay.
financial statements.
That's your motion?
I
Thank you.
second that motion.
And a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion passes. Now are we done? Yes, I know. Thank you. Okay, future board member comments. I am making them laugh up here. Board member comments or future agenda items. Shanice.
Thank you all so much. I'm actually really tired, so I'm so glad we're almost done at 10. So thank you for facilitating a well meeting tonight. I wanted to share a couple of statistics as we move back to being normal. And for some families, it is not. So there was a report that was given, and I wanted to share with my colleagues about the state of Silicon Valley, San Mateo and Santa Clara counties. And I'll send you guys the full report, but the lowest rates of self-sufficiency among Silicon Valley households are those with children. It's 41% single mothers, 73% Latina single mothers, 87%, and those who are not fluent in English, which is 90%. 43% of our household in the Bay Area have wages well below the self-sufficiency standard. More than 6 out of 10 Latino households live below self-sufficiency in 2021. And the poverty rate amongst African-American residents is about 12%. And that has more than doubled than those of Asian and white residents. And so, and the cost of rise of living in this community, gasoline is up 36%. I think it's up more now. Meat, poultry, fish, and eggs is 27%. Fresh fruits and vegetables, 15%. Cereals and bakery products, 15%. And household energy, 18%. Why am I sharing this information? For some of our families, it's not going back to normal. And I'm really concerned about some of our population that have really been hit financially, and what that will do to our numbers around families living according to the McKinney Act, the homeless definition of being unhoused or couch surfing. And so I just want us to be in that mindset, and also let you all know that the COVID rent relief fund and the mortgage relief fund, the portal closes March 31st. So we do have a number of families that are behind and still looking for jobs that pay at a certain level so that they can live in the peninsula. So I just want to keep that in mind as we think about going back to normal and what that really means, that some of us may still be struggling. And so kids may be showing up differently at school, maybe working more, maybe worried about mom and dad, or whoever is raising them. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And then the last thing is, what was I gonna say? I think that was the last thing, and that I've been trying to get around to schools and would love to, as Sean is here, to learn a little bit more about Sequoia, Woodside, and Caramont this year. Love to get out and see them, or even go to a concert or something like that, or play. And then last thing is that I've signed up for the CSBA Legislative Day next week. So if there's something that you all want me to share with our legislator, a couple of meetings have been set with a couple of representatives that I'll be going to. So if there's something that you all would like me to share as far as advocacy and support, I know there's a lot around special ed that's out there around full funding. Just let me know and I'll feel free to share that with others.
Shanice, I have an extra ticket to Carmont's choir concert Friday night, if you'd like to go with me at 7 o'clock.
All right.
So you can go with me. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, because I don't think my husband really wants to go. So
I'll go
you can
with
take,
you.
I haven't invited my husband yet, so I'll take you. And Sean, I'm glad you're here. The only thing I wanted to comment on is that I attended the Dreamers Unite conference on Saturday, which was organized by Sequoia High School and our Dream Club. And I was only going to go for part of the conference. I stayed for every minute, and it made me so proud of your students and your staff. Heard so much about the way teachers help kids navigate their college applications and piece together funding. And anyway, I was so proud. So I'm glad you're here tonight to hear my comment. It was a huge highlight, and it is so, I mean, it's so uplifting to be on our sites and see the great work that's being done. So thanks. Oh, it was great. Any other comments?
Yeah, I'll comment that as on the facilities subcommittee, we excited about the architects that we approved today and the projects that are getting started there that will be coming before the board sometime in the next few months before our decision date. And today met with the poll group, and I feel like it's a good survey going out, and we'll be hearing the results of that in the coming months. So some things to look forward to on the facility side. There's a lot going on. Attended the community meeting with the community college district with Dr. Williams, and that's also some new stuff, exciting, going in a different direction than the poll. I mean, just another area of things moving forward that are very positive. And then Chris and I with the budget meeting, and then a lot of positive things happening in different areas of district that I'm happy about.
Yeah, and yet another side, I've been attending several of the CTE symposiums that have been running at the various campuses, and I've consistently been hugely impressed with the number of business partners who have shown up. The way that both the presentations and then the work groups done in Zoom breakout rooms have been structured. The students have been well prepared and highly engaged, and the variety of career options being presented to them in those forums are just amazing. At Tide, they represented the two career pathways really well. And the kids were just very into it. How can I get going on this? The Woodside Green Academy also had a great range of presenters and a lot of engagement. And next week I'll be able to join in with the Carmont Biotech Institute on theirs. And all of it ties so well to the work that's being done with the Spotlight document and what's going on. So I am very enthused about our progress in the world of college and career preparation. And next, a week from Friday, also at Carmont, will be the chamber music night for instrumental music. And although I don't have a spare ticket, I believe they're available, and Sean might be able to hook you up with one. And I think Woodside, which you mentioned as well, is beginning their musical, I think is Freaky Friday. Yeah, tomorrow night. Right. Yeah.
So lots-
Woo-ha.
Lots of good opportunities.
Get on
Yay.
those websites.
We can go back to these things. Chris, nothing? Okay, so with that, motion to adjourn? Motion? All in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.